and give you some information about the National Turkey Federation, Wild Turkey Federation, and the National Wild Turkey Federation recently made a donation to the Wyoming Game and Fish Department's Access Yes program of $5,000. And so just very appreciative of that donation and of the Turkey Federation's commitment to conserving wild turkeys and preserving the hunting heritage here in Wyoming and elsewhere. As you know, the Access Yes program supports several programs for that goes to private landowners who provide access for hunters and anglers for hunting and fishing. Each dollar donated into that program translate to about 4 acres of access for hunters and anglers. So the National Wild Turkey Federation's donation provides about 20,000 acres of access here. Access Yes donations in 2014 total about $200,000. 75,000 of that came from groups like the National Wild Turkey Federation. Another $750,000 came into the access programs from conservation stamps and other revenue sources. And so just another little bit of information, the Access Yes donations go to 3 different access programs: the long-term easements, the walk-in programs, and hunter management areas. So a lot of positive stuff comes from donations like this. And so I'd like to thank Casey Dickinson from the National Wild Turkey Federation and bring him up to speak now.
Thank you. Okay. Over the years, NWTF has given Game and Fish a little over $100,000 for the Access Yes. And to show how good it works, last weekend I was able to take a youth on his first turkey hunt, and we hunted the walk-in area in Bighorn Basin, and he got his first turkey there. And for that, I want to thank you guys.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take a break here and. Oh, excuse me.
Can't take a break. You just got started. Oh, okay.
Yeah. I never have. It's a blast. Colin and Elkin. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Oh, for sure. I gotta leave. I gotta be in Roxbury by 5 o'clock.
I was a little bit hasty here there. Rennie was standing there, so I went ahead and did that. But I need to do a little bit of housekeeping here to get things straightened up. I mentioned break, and Richard was just about out his chair. Anyway, if you want to speak to an item that's on the agenda, please sign in at the back with Janet, and you'll be placed on that. She'll make sure that that gets up here, and we'll honor your request at that time. Cell phones, if you have your cell phone or other personal device, please turn it on to silence or vibrate on that, if you would, please. Just 1 second here. I believe the order of the meeting is if you come up and speak to the commission there. With that, we'll go ahead into the meeting. Gene?
Mr. President.
Yes.
Before Gene, I'm sorry. Just a second. Something got away from us yesterday when we closed business, but I think we probably was short in acknowledging the Wildlife Division and everybody else concerned in putting together the season-setting program. Most of the time, we do not realize that's a year-round operation. I'm not sure that it would be fair to try to estimate the amount of man hours, the flight hours, the in the truck hours, the behind the computer hours that go into that 4-hour presentation, 5-hour presentation, and then when you ask a question, there's somebody here with an answer. And for 4 hours for us to sit through a year's worth of work that it takes to put that together, I think that we certainly want you guys to know that it's appreciated. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Well, thank you, Richard, for making that report, because I do think it's important.
Good morning, President Price and members of the Commission and Director Talbot. Jean Cole, Chief of the Fiscal Division, and I'm here this morning to present agenda item number 13, which is the appointment of licensed selling agents. The department has received applications for the appointment of 2 specific vendors since our last commission meeting. Both of these licensed agents today are non-sporting good vendors. So for the benefit of our new commissioners, when anytime we get a request from any business that wants to be a licensed vendor, the department, they have the option of applying as a non-sporting good or a sporting good. For non-sporting good applicants, which these are today, the department has the option to accept or not accept the request for an application to be a licensed vendor. If we accept the application, then by regulation, we're required to advertise in the local town in which the applicant is applying, and any business in that area is free to apply. And then the game warden makes a recommendation on which applicant best fits the needs of the department. So for the 2 applicants today, the first one is in Commissioner Crank's district, which is Come and Get It Concessions. And the history on this application is that state parks, for Kurt Gowdy State Parks, they have a concessionaire that operates in the park selling refreshments and things, and they also sell licenses for the department. And recently, the state parks did a bid looking for a new vendor for that particular area. And so state parks went through the process of actually doing the evaluation of, through the bid process of identifying what specific vendor they wanted to appoint in the park. So the department did not advertise for this agent. And Come and Get It Concessions was a successful applicant for state parks. So the department would like to recommend that particular business as a vendor. In the town of Buffalo, we recently lost, early in this year, one of our vendors in that town. We have historically had 3 businesses in the town of Buffalo selling licenses. The local game warden, Jim Seaman, would ask to replace that vendor that we lost this past year. So the department approved him to advertise. We received 2 applications, one from Bighorn Co-op and the other from the Maverick store. And the local game warden would like to appoint Maverick because they're open 24 hours, 7 days a week, meeting a need that's not currently being met in the Buffalo area. So with that, the department would request that the commission appoint Come and Get It Concessions at Kurt Gowdy State Park and the Maverick in Buffalo.
Are there any comments from the public on this at this point? Commissioners, questions? I guess I'd entertain a motion.
I'd so move.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Crank, second by Commissioner Anselmi. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Motion passes. Thanks, Gene. Meredith?
Good morning, Mr. President, Commissioners, Director Talbot. Meredith Wood, Chief Financial Officer of the Game and Fish Department. I'm here this morning to present agenda item number 14, which is the request to transfer FY15 revenues for 2 areas. The first is the Lifetime License Fund, which is identified under Wyoming Statute 231501C, and that gives the authority to the Commission on an annual basis to approve the transfer of 6% of the balance of that account. That account is made up of all lifetime license sales revenue. The 5-year average in that account, total number of licenses is approximately 810 licenses for a total revenue of just over $400,000. The current balance in the account is $5.1 million. We will have 2 more months of lifetime license sale revenue in the account before we make the transfer, but we're anticipating approximately $300,000 if the commission approves the transfer of the full 6%.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for? I do have one, Meredith. This is the account for the people that buy a lifetime license for hunting, fishing, whatever, the money goes in. We transfer, it says money transferred from the fund on that. Now, does that take money out of the body of the fund or the principal of the fund, or is this just interest that's accumulated in the fund?
No, this is actually the body of the fund. So the fund is built by those sales, as you mentioned, Mr. President, and the interest is earned and retained in that fund. So on an annual basis, the 6% that the commission has authority, the maximum is the 6% that the commission has authority to transfer, includes direct sales and interest.
Okay, so the interest rate that it may accumulate plus some of the body of the fund,
Correct.
possibly.
Correct.
Is the fund growing as time goes on or depleting?
Over the last 5 years, it is growing slightly. I mentioned the 5-year average is approximately 400,000. The last 2 years, the transfer at 6% has been right over 300,000, so it is growing.
A little bit. Is the principal of the fund invested?
It's invested to the state treasurer's office along with all other state funds. So they manage all of our investments of all state.
So there's a combination of stock market, different things, basically the state's portfolio
Yes.
for investment. Okay, these are questions that I had to run through my mind. I thought I'd ask them because there may be somebody else interested.
Sure.
President,
Commissioner Anselmi?
we spoke yesterday, maybe for the benefit of the other commissioners, then you have another fund. We talked about this yesterday. You got another trust fund that's
We do, Mr. President, Commissioner Anselmi. This is the Lifetime License Fund. It retains only those sales from the sale of lifetime licenses, like we discussed. The fund that you're referring to is our Game and Fish Trust Fund, whereby the corpus of that fund, as you were talking about interest versus total balance, is inviolate. We cannot touch the balance of that fund, and that's currently just over 26 million. So on an annual basis, through no action required of the commission, the interest earned on that fund goes directly into our Game and Fish Operating Fund to be distributed amongst all of our programs and budgets as necessary. So that's the primary difference. There is that Wyoming Game and Fish Trust Fund. The commission does have the authority, however, to direct where that interest goes. And historically, it's gone to habitat projects and conservation education projects, which you did hear about in the FY16 budget. We have 1.2 million for those types of projects from the interest earned off of the trust fund.
how'd they get the 26 million in there?
Conservation stamp revenue, donations, primarily is how it's built. Yeah.
Thank you for those explanations, Meredith. Okay, we have a motion on the floor, I believe. Did we get a motion on that?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. It's been moved by Commissioner Crank and seconded by Commissioner Rail. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Meredith.
Good morning, Mr. President, Director Talbot, members of the commission. I have a rather quick item, I think, here this morning, and one that the commission has considered in the recent past. Commission Regulation Chapter 10 authorizes the commission to consider private ownership of wildlife in the cases of when it's for educational purposes, basically. And Bear River State Park has had a permit from the commission and from the department for several years to possess 3 elk. Their old elk, they had a 19-year-old elk, bull elk that died, and so their herd now consists of 2. In the past, we've authorized them to have 3. And so our proposal for consideration by the commission today is to provide them with another calf bull elk so that they can fulfill their permit of a total of 3 elk at Bear River State Park. We would, if the commission approves this, we would provide them the elk from one of our feed grounds to eliminate the potential for bringing an elk from a CWD endemic area to reduce any chances of disease. And obviously that's a good thing too, to take it from within the borders of Wyoming. So with that, I would recommend that the commission approve the department's provision of a calf bull elk from the feed ground, from one of our feed grounds in the western part of the state to Bear River State Park.
Mr. President, I'd move that we transfer the calf elk, hopefully weaned, to the Bear River State Park.
Just a minute. Let's see if there's any questions
Okay.
on that.
Mr. President, I'm not, where is Bear River State Park?
It's
Evanston.
it's north of Evanston.
And how confined are these? Tell me a little about this situation.
Mr. President, Commissioner Culver, I have not visited the site. I don't know how confined they are. I know that they have a long track record of being able to contain these elk, and we haven't had issues with them escaping. We have at other places in the state where we've done similar things. One that comes to mind is, we used to have a elk permitted in Cheyenne at the park there, and they had kind of a high fence deal where the elk weren't allowed to get out. But this is a similar kind of a situation.
Mr. President, Commissioner Comer, I believe that their enclosure over there is about 20 acres. That's just south of the interstate, if I recall correctly.
Right there at the rest area.
It goes right, the interstate goes right by it. If you look out, you can see it
I see.
right there.
I was just curious. I had never heard of this.
Commissioner Anselmi.
Did we give them a buffalo last year too? Or was that, they got a couple buffalo in there too. They got, or something.
I'm sure they're domestic
Oh.
bison.
And what happened to the horn for this 19-year-old one that died?
That was chuckles inside you.
Commissioner
Chuck,
Commissioner
big brother
Anselmi.
died, then the horns were no longer live wildlife, so I'm sure they disposed of them in a proper way.
They couldn't collect until after the 1st of May.
That's right. It is west of the Continental Divide, Mr. President.
Well, that was a
My
good little
motion
piece of
stands.
levity.
I
Are there
will
any
second that.
Questions from the audience on this? Commissioners, any more questions?
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Who made the motion?
Richard.
Richard made the motion. Anselmi seconded it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Nay for all those that vote against. No. Motion passes.
Morning, Mr. President, Director Talbot, Commissioners. It's my honor to this morning introduce, excuse me, Miss Gwen McKee. She's President and Principal Biologist of Thunderbird Wildlife Consulting. She's going to visit with the Commission this morning on a project she's working on, translocating prairie dogs on the Antelope Coal Mine property for mountain plover habitat. And you'll be asked to approve the transfer of the current multi-year authorization for this translocation of prairie dogs.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Welcome, Gwen. I see you here again.
Yes, sir.
Saw
Good
you
morning,
last
Mr.
year, here
President.
again this year, here again next year, maybe.
And the year before that, and a couple of years before that. And so, yes, sir. Good morning, Mr. President, Commissioners, and Director Talbot. As President Price just noted, this is not the first time that some of you have heard this. I know Commissioners Claudia, Price, and Ms. Little, who's not here today, are hopefully quite familiar with this program. And this is a program. The purpose of my visit this morning is really, as Mr. Smith said, just to request a transfer from the permit authorization from my company to my colleagues with ICF International in Gillette, and Bill Vetter and Nicole Rubeck-Schurz are here from ICF this morning. And it's primarily, I have transferred my operations to Sheridan, and for logistical purposes, it's much more efficient for the program and for Antelope Coal for my colleagues at ICF to take this over. And we'll get to that in a minute. So I know that you all have had this information for a little while, so I won't read out everything to you. But just as a quick recap, at the January 2013 meeting, the commissioners did graciously approve a 4-year authorization for this program. Again, after multiple annual appearances before the commission, which we greatly appreciated and Antelope very much appreciates. The sole purpose of this translocation program is to restore mountain plover habitat at the coal mine, which is a requirement from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Department of Environmental Quality as part of their habitat restoration requirements from disturbances caused by coal mining at the Antelope mine. During the 2013 meeting where you authorized the multi-year authorization, Mr. Emmerich and Director Talbot both were very helpful in explaining to the commission that the current prairie dog translocation rule, for lack of a better word off the top of my head, does authorize these multi-year authorizations with the understanding that there's an annual requirement to pursue and properly execute the state's Chapter 33 permitting process, which we do every year, and as evidenced by renewal of that permit every year, and ICF has the same permit. We have been successfully meeting the requirements of the program. Mountain plovers are almost in a way misnamed. They're not really plovers like most plovers in that they don't like water. They're in the badlands of really short grass, particularly prairie dog colonies, and they don't eat seeds. They mostly eat bugs and grasshoppers, beetles. The Wyoming population is not huge. The current estimate's about 3,400, and Colorado and Wyoming right now are the strongholds. An Antelope coal mine is the only coal mine in the Powder River Basin that has a regular breeding population of plovers. So it's not a huge population, but it is a stable population, and it's the only population within the coal mine area. So as I say, black-tailed prairie dogs are, not sure what just happened. I don't think I hit anything different. But anyway, black-tailed prairie dogs are essentially very important for mountain plovers, particularly in Wyoming and Montana. And so that's why we came up with this idea. It's really difficult. The coal mines are required to restore habitat that they disturb. That's just the law of their operations. And it's extremely difficult because of the habitat that plovers like, which is really short grass like buffalo grass, things like that. Bird's foot, sagebrush, those particular species are extremely difficult to replant and successfully restore. So because all of the prairie dogs or most of the plovers are in prairie dog colonies at the mine, as evidenced by more than 30 years of monitoring, we proposed to Antelope, and they accepted, and then of course the commission approved, that we translocate small groups of prairie dogs. I might as well put this down since that's not working. So part of your requirements for operating this program is that in January 2012, the commission came out with for prairie dog translocations that required the proponent to contact landowners within 5 miles of the proposed project area and go through a series of steps, which we have done successfully year after year after year. The vast majority of the landowners surrounding Antelope are either neutral or supportive of the program. We do have a couple that are not supportive, but it's not that they're not supportive of the program, they just don't like prairie dogs. And so they can't wrap their head around anything that would somehow be okay for prairie dogs. But they have no problem with the program itself. So the bottom line is the majority of the neighbors surrounding the area are supportive of the program. Here we go. Back on track. Yeah, I love technology. I'm just going to skip through. I'm just going to go right to the map because I think, well, and I know that you all have seen this. We've used a variety of translocation methods. This is the, I know there's a pointer on here. This is the current permit area. When you approved this 2 years ago, the permit area was actually a little bit smaller. And since then, the line that was on that map for the pending permit area has since been approved. So the target areas are this little black area here inside reclamation and these areas here also in reclamation. The red line is the permit boundary. all of the green is Antelope Coal property. So this project takes place on Antelope Coal property. The prairie dogs are trapped on Antelope Coal's property. They're moved 2 to 3 miles, depending on where we caught the dogs, and they're released on coal mine property. So this is a landowner map. Again, the green is the Antelope Coal property. This is primarily Forest Service. This is another coal operator's property. This is actually land that is under Antelope control, but is being leased by the neighboring rancher. And then here's some private lands down in here with different ownerships. This is really the key map for you to see. Antelope Coal is in green. All of this dark blue are the neighboring landowners within 5 miles who have given their consent or not objected to the project. And then the gray areas, like I say, this little group down here and little scattereds, they just feel so strongly about prairie dogs in general that they could not offer their support. And the others colors are neutral. So as you can see, the vast majority of the surrounding 5 mile perimeter, for goodness sakes, is comfortable with, I'm really a lot better with binoculars and a spotting scope than I am with this contraption here. They're in support of the project, basically. So this is just a little summary. Part of the requirements that you all had were that we got written consent from Campbell and Converse County because the mine straddles the county line. So we appeared on all of the commission meetings for the Campbell County Commissioners, the Converse County Commissioners, Campbell County Weed and Pest, Converse County Weed and Pest. And all 4 supported the multi-year authorization. Now, Converse County was not comfortable with us translocating more than 20 dogs per year. So that's what we do. We don't catch more than 20 dogs. And part of the permitting requirements for our Chapter 33 permit is at least 20 days before each trapping season begins, we send out another letter to every single landowner within the 5 mile perimeter and notify them that, don't forget, we're going to be doing this on Antelope Coal's mine. And we haven't had a single landowner respond to that notification by saying, heck no, or other words, you're not going to do this. So it's been a successful program. We've honored all of the concerns of our neighbors and our Antelope's neighbors and honored all the permit requirements. And so, as I say, we don't have 100% of the landowners, but we do have the majority. So since we started in 2002, we've transferred 144 prairie dog colonies, or prairie dogs. All of the colony boundaries are monitored every year to make sure they're staying well within the permit area. Part of the conditions that Converse County commissioners, actually I think all 4 of those, the weed and pest and the county commissioners, requested that lethal control be an option if the prairie dogs colonies start expanding outside the permit area. That has not been necessary, but it is a tool that Antelope is authorized to use and prepared to use if they need to. So all the precautions that could possibly be taken are being taken to ensure that this program maintains its intent. So again, the reason we're here today is because I moved my primary operations to Sheridan, and it's logistically not feasible. It's feasible. It's not efficient for me to be in Sheridan and try to get to Antelope in southern county or Campbell County and northern Converse County to translocate prairie dogs. I work part-time with ICF. We work collaboratively on many, many projects. Nicole would be the project manager. She's trapped black-footed ferrets. They've trapped flying squirrels. They've trapped small mammals. So it's a seamless transition because we work together very well. My crew and/or I will be present during this first transition year to make sure that everything goes smoothly, to show them how we've been doing it over the years, So we won't just walk away from the program. We'll make sure that we're there on site to ensure that everything's going smoothly, and we're very readily accessible with email or phone call or anything, texting. So I don't know, do y'all have any questions? As I say, at least a couple of you have become very familiar with this program, and I'd be certainly happy, and Bill and Nicole also are here to answer your questions.
Thank you, Gwen. And I would like to say that Gwen's right. I've been here for a number of years, and she's presented every year. And the thing I appreciate about you and your presentation, you have things well organized and well planned. And as you know, the prairie dog translocation is a little controversial, but the presentation you make and the things you've done, I think, make it work for you very well. And I appreciate the work you've done.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate that.
With that, the commissioners?
Sorry, one question.
Yes, sir.
Where do you catch them?
There's prairie dog colonies inside the permit area, and so all of the trapping occurs within the permit area for antelope coal. And in fact, I can go back and show you literally where we catch them.
Sorry,
Okay.
I didn't know if you went somewhere else and brought them there. Or...
No, sir. All of the colonies that we trap from are inside the permit area on antelope coal property. And so we just set our traps up there, collect them, and then right away, we don't keep them overnight or anything. We trap in the early mornings because we don't want them to get overheated or anything. And so we set the traps before sunrise, trap until mid-morning, take anything we catch immediately over to the release sites where we have enclosures, put them in the enclosure that's attached to an underground burrow, and you all saw the pictures, and keep them in those retention cages for 5 to 7 days, depending on the age of the animal, and then give them a gentle, slow release so they can go in and out as they choose to basically establish a new colony and reclamation inside the mine.
This is probably a stupid question, but why do you have to move? Why don't where they're at before?
Why don't they go there on their own?
Well, no, why? If they're in one part of the mine, then why do the birds don't go there? So that's why you're moving them someplace else where the birds are or something? Or
Oh, right. Well, mostly it's because the coal mine's going to progress through different areas. And so that's basically what started this whole thing. We had a big prairie dog colony in the middle. In fact, where we're going to release them now, the primary site up right up in here, we had mountain plovers and prairie dogs, and golden eagles would come in and feed on the prairie dogs. It was a great little community, but they needed to mine there. And honestly, what happened was one day I said, "Oh, it's too bad we can't just move those prairie dogs into reclamation." And they said, "Oh, well, why don't you do that?" And here we are. And so, right. So it's just because the mine is progressing through the plover habitat. So we're restoring, basically jumping back over the disturbance and putting them back where they were. It's just now that it's reclaimed.
thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mr. President, I have one question on
Or
Gwen on plovers. So are they colony nesters, or does each breeding pair have an area? How does that work with it?
Mr. President, Commissioner Culver, they actually, they usually have 2 nests per pair. The female will lay eggs, then the male will look after those eggs, and she'll go off and lay a second clutch oftentimes.
Really?
But they have their own, they're not colonial nesters like gulls or at least terns, things like that. So they have their own very distinct little area, but you might have 2 or 3 pairs inside a same prairie dog colony, but they're not really group nesting for security or anything. Their way of having a secure nest site is to be very cryptically colored. It's hard to see a mountain plover unless they look at you and you can see the white forehead. They're very subtly colored and their eggs blend in really well. But so they're not colonial nesters, but you will have multiple pairs.
And the population stable there?
At the coal mine, yes, sir.
Mr. President,
yes, Patrick. Father.
the National Thunder Basin grasslands is due east of this mine. Is that correct? I was out there on one of those prairie dog tours that Director Talbot made us do. And as I recall, a part of that tour, we could see the mine. I'm assuming that mine is within about, 3 or 4 miles of one of those ranches out there. Have I got my directions right?
Mr. President and Commissioner Clouda, you're right. The Thunder Basin grassland comes up to Antelope, but it also comes up to the North Antelope Rochelle Mine, which is just to the north, and Black Thunder Mine. So there are at least 3 mines that kind of go in a gentle semicircle that all butt up. So depending on how many silos you saw and where they were, or respective to you, you could have been seeing any one of those
Okay.
3.
I'm pretty sure it was this one, as I recall.
It very well could have been.
So,
Okay.
thank you.
Yes, sir.
Do we have other questions? Anybody from the audience wish to speak?
Mr. President, members of the commission, just to provide a little bit of background on this agenda item, as Ms. McKee indicated, when they first came to the commission and the department, I think it's been about 10 or 12 years ago, this was a highly, highly controversial issue as far as moving prairie dogs, as she referenced, across county lines and between jurisdiction of weed and pest districts and those types of things. We developed initially 12 very, very stringent criteria and asked them to abide by all of them, which they did, and they have done a very, very good job of that. And then, as she referenced, we went back and modified those in the past few years, and I think we're down to 8 or 10 criteria that we have asked them to make sure that we don't. One of the issues was visiting with the county commissions, the weed and pest, and adjoining landowners, so that we can have everyone's concerns taken care of, and they have done an excellent job in doing that and conducting this project.
Thank you, Director Talbot. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I guess we're at the point I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Commissioner Crank makes a motion.
I'll second that.
Commissioner Culver seconds it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There's no opposed. Motion passes. Thank you. And thank you, Gwen. Appreciate it. And so we're going to be seeing these new people. Would
Yep.
you care to introduce them up there at the podium, please?
Absolutely, Mr. President. 2017 will be back. And that's because this current authorization goes through 2016. So you can expect to see Bill and or Nicole on that early 2017 agenda. If y'all would come on up. So this is Bill Vetter with ICF International and also Nicole Rubeck-Schertz. They've been in the Gillette office as lead biologists for several years now, and I'll just let them chat for a second. Thank you.
Okay.
Hello. Yeah, I've been there for 11 years in the Gillette office, so this is my 11th year anyway. And like Nicole, or like Gwen said, I'm kind of our team manager for our team of biologists there, which is all we have in that office is just wildlife biologists. So I kind of oversee all of those. I'm the administrator on our current Chapter 33 and Chapter 10 permits. So I oversee all of the requirements in terms of annual reporting and all of those things. And like Gwen introduced, Nicole would be our project manager for this because she works on Antelope Mine currently doing the wildlife baseline and has also got some great credentials in terms of trapping mammals and things like that, but she can speak more about that.
Hi, I'm Nicole Rubeck-Schertz. I've been with ICF for 6 years now. I work at the North Antelope Rochelle, the School Creek Mine, and now Antelope Mine, which I'm working with Gwen to learn all the ins and outs of all the wildlife surveys and learning how to properly trap the prairie dogs. But I do have experience trapping black-footed ferrets. I did that up in Montana with the Malta BLM and also with the Fish and Wildlife Service up there. And I've trapped small mammals and fish and butterflies and all kinds of little critters.
Okay.
You're
Thank
just playing
you.
mean.
Thank you for
You're just playing
coming
mean,
forward.
aren't you?
Mr. President, Commissioners, and Director Talbot, thank you very much. We certainly appreciate your continued support of this program, and I know that Antelope Mine appreciates it as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President, if I can take just a second, I
Go ahead.
don't think everybody here knows that Gwen was one of the original members of the Wyoming Wildlife Natural Resource Trust Fund Board, appointed by Governor Freudenthal, and I believe your term has, okay. I know in my previous life, I worked with you on a lot of projects that you partnered with us on, and I know over the years you've partnered with the Game and Fish on countless projects. And you've spent most of your weekends, I think, touring those different projects, including one that you helped us with recently, that Newcastle fishing pond that you and Mr. Bannister, I know personally, fought that project through. And we really appreciate your efforts on that. We are going to start construction in just a few weeks. That should be done in a couple of months. That project will be completed. I wanted to say thank you for your service on that board and all the projects you've helped us get through.
Mr. President and Commissioner Culver, it was my sincere pleasure that never imagined I would have that opportunity to contribute at that level. It breaks my heart that I moved to Sheridan because that means I'm off the board. But it's, fresh energy to get in there. I can't think of anything more amazing than to have had the opportunity to contribute at that level to a state that I've wanted to be in since I was 3 years old. Took me a long dang time to get here, but once I got here, by golly, I latched on. But, that's one of my favorite, it's the 10-year anniversary of the trust this year, and Wyoming Wildlife is doing a big article on it in the May issue, I believe. And I was asked about, what are some projects that really stand out? And that Newcastle Pond project was one that I think is just so special because of its potential to really draw in the community and help them actively participate in the amazing resources that we have here in Wyoming and inspire them to get excited about it and then go out even farther, broaden their horizons. So I know that was a tough project. It took a lot of work on everybody's part to get that through, and I was really so excited that it got through, and I'm looking forward to driving over to Newcastle now and then and seeing how it's working out. So
We'll keep you posted.
please do. Thank you so much. I won't take up any more of your time. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Gwen. I guess our next introducer will be Scott Edwards, and he'll introduce Aaron Kerr.
Commissioner President Price, Commissioners, Director Talbot, I'd like to introduce Aaron Kerr, our statewide law enforcement coordinator, who will be presenting the commission revisions of policy BIII, the authorized emergency vehicle lighting and non-emergency vehicle lighting policy for the commission's review and approval. Aaron?
Good morning, President Price, members of the commission, Director Talbot. My presentation this morning, just wanted to go over some modifications to our existing vehicle lighting policy. This both outlines our emergency and non-emergency vehicle lighting policy. So basically, the first change, I guess, would be a change to the title of that policy, just to reflect some state statute. The current policy is known as the law enforcement and non-law enforcement vehicle lighting policy. By state statute, Game and Fish law enforcement vehicles are defined as authorized emergency vehicles. So the title of this policy would just reflect the statutory language there. Basically, the purpose of this policy is to guide what lighting we're going to be putting on our vehicles that are going to be displayed, basically to enhance public and employee safety. So as you go through the policy, the changes we're proposing on our marked authorized emergency vehicles, these be vehicles driven by our game wardens, wildlife administration, enforcement personnel. Those officers are quite often, we don't use our lights as much as a lot of law enforcement agencies, but we are called on to respond to sometimes life and death situations, whether accident, some kind of hazardous wildlife incident, responding to back up another officer either within our department or with another law enforcement agency. We also are using those lights to affect traffic stops on potential violators, mark our wildlife check stations, and maintain visibility when we're on, say, an injured wildlife call on the side of a busy roadway. And so the proposed changes in this policy are basically just allowing for a little more flexibility in the lighting that we can put on those vehicles. The current policy as it exists, basically a marked law enforcement vehicle can have one red and one blue light either inside the front windshield
or at grill level. This policy would just be a change in language to say a minimum of one, so an officer could have potentially those lights up both inside the windshield and grill level. That's definitely going to, double the amount of lights you have and increase your visibility to the public. So again, it's just to maintain a little extra flexibility. It also allows for additional lighting on the rear of the vehicle. I know a lot of sheriff's departments are using lights on their tailgates, small red and blue LED lights on their tailgates to really enhance their visibility. As far as our unmarked authorized emergency vehicles, these would be our vehicles driven by our investigative unit. They still have the need to respond to some emergencies, or again, make traffic stops on violators, those kind of things. Again, this would just increase the visibility of their vehicles. On our non-emergency vehicles, those are usually driven by our wildlife biologists, some other non-enforcement personnel that are taking wildlife-related calls. Again, maybe hazardous wildlife, trophy game calls, wildlife calls on busy roadways. Again, this just allows for a few more additional amber lights, primarily on the rear of those vehicles. They're usually displaying those lights when they're parked on the side of the road somewhere for their safety and visibility. So overall, cost to the department to implement this policy, this change would be minimal. All of our existing vehicles, they're in compliance with the existing policy. This proposed changes just allowing for a little bit more lighting. Those lights can be purchased with existing equipment budgets. We're not coming to the commission and asking for a whole bunch of money to go out and buy thousands of dollars worth of new lights. It's just as basically on a case-by-case basis, when approved by an officer supervisor, that they could order some additional lighting to put on the vehicle. And then those lights are installed by YDOT radio techs. I guess with that, entertain any questions the commission might have.
Commissioner, do you have any questions of Aaron?
Mr. President?
Yes.
Did you say, what do you have set up on the back end of your vehicles for the wardens?
Currently, most all of our wardens are using light bar.
Like what you had mentioned, the sheriff's department and so forth?
Yeah, actually what we're running on is usually on the headache rack or just inside the cab on the back, a vertical light strip about 30 inches wide with the red and blue on either side and then amber in the back. Some wardens still just have a small red and a small blue kind of at the top of their headache rack, and then maybe a couple of amber lights for caution. So,
but there is something now.
There is something now. This would be in addition to those light bars. Those would be put maybe on a tailgate or red and blue flashers built within the reverse lights on a vehicle. This policy would allow for that as well.
Any other questions from the commission? Any public questions? I think we're going to be, if I understand the plans right, Scott, we're going to be buying a bunch of new vehicles in the near future.
Mr. President, members of the commission, I guess we will certainly, we go through an annual cycle where we purchase vehicles, and that's coming up in the very near future. That's correct.
Okay. So these will be equipped with a new lighting system, or is this a preference of the individuals running the vehicles?
President Price, members commission, what typically we do is when an officer gets a new truck, if the current lights are fully functional and working just fine, we're not buying new lights for those vehicles. We're just transferring them from the existing vehicle. So again, anything new would be just from existing equipment, maybe upgrading the vehicle that's in service now to put more lights on it, or as they get a new vehicle, maybe buy a couple of additional lights to put on it. Maybe.
Okay, thank you. Yes, with that said, I'd entertain a motion to approve Aaron's request.
So moved.
Commissioner Anselmi. Commissioner Anselmi makes the motion. Commissioner Rail seconded it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Mr. President, while we're on this subject, could, and it's not fair to ask Aaron this, but perhaps somebody from the department could explain, okay, you said that DOT technicians install these lights. For what services do we pay DOT mechanics or technicians, or do we use them? And how do we pay them? Do we have some kind of a reimbursable, or how does that work?
Mr. President, members of the commission, the Wyoming Department of Transportation radio techs install all of our radios and enforcement and those non-enforcement vehicles that have radios, and that radio system is the state law enforcement communication system. We call it the SALEC system. They do all of that work for all of our employees. In addition to that, they are now doing some work on our lighting systems as referenced by Aaron and others. The only other work that we routinely have YDOT do is in some shops, certainly the Cheyenne shop, we can take our vehicles over and have routine maintenance, oil changes and tire rotations and those types of things done. And we have to reimburse them for all of that work. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the next item. Scott Copeland, would you please come up?
Cost savings versus taking them to a shop.
Absolutely. For example, I've got to have radios and that kind of stuff put in my private district process. It's about
President Price, Commissioners, Director Talbot, Scott Cochran, I'm Services Division Chief. I'm talking to you on agenda item number 18, which is giving you an update on proposed changes to Chapter 23, which is the regulation governing use of lands and waters acquired or administered by the Wyoming Game and Fish Commission. Started this project as a review to comply with the governor's directive to try to reduce our language by a third and our number of regulations by a third, which ended up more transferring into an opportunity to add some clarity to Chapter 23 and work collaboratively amongst all divisions, but especially amongst wildlife and services to address issues with commission-owned land and law enforcement's ability to enforce those, and then also with our PLPW program. When looking at what we changed, I think we reduced the overall length from 9 to 6 pages. I'll kind of move through some of the big changes and see if you have any questions when we're done. Basically, we reduced a bunch of definitions in the beginning, reduced a bunch of redundancy. A lot of those are modified for clarity as well. That takes us through page 1 and 2. The big change we start seeing in Chapter 23 is on page 3, which is Section 4. Section 4 is was in Commission Policy Guidelines, which since we moved that into here, that will be removed eventually. But Chapter 4 deals with your ability to manage the lands and waters. Number A is in accordance with the deeds and agreements, strategic plans, terrestrial and aquatic priorities, management plans, and regulations. B addresses public use and special uses on lands acquired and administered by the commission. You guys all have that in front of you in your notebook? Just wanted to make sure we don't have power.
Yeah, I do have it. I can't see that anyway.
C is some new language for conservation easements and how we administer our wildlife habitat conservation program. Basically, that wording in there is to protect farmland and make us eligible for NRCS funding in the future.
We added D, special use activities, and what that means, short-term and long-term. Short-term can be approved by the local commissioner, long-term needs to come in front of the commission as a whole. That basically covers all the language that was in the commission policy that is now in chapter 23. Move towards the next big change, which would be additions, removal of language for the PLPW program.
What was that number again? Sorry, Mr. President.
So that's section 7.
Okay.
So while the main body of the chapter 23 has not changed, we just tried to make it read easier for our constituents and for you, make management easier, and to reduce the overall length, which I think we did by 3 pages. So we did open this up for comment, and I think we only had one online or at a public meeting from Bull Hunters of Wyoming. They wanted to see it changed where we could put up a temporary blind on private land, which it says here you cannot. Discussions with Wildlife Division, we feel that's appropriate to take to the individual landowners to ask for their permission rather than something that the department would grant. So other than that, there was really no opposition or any other comments from the public. So with that, I stand for questions.
Okay. Thank you, Scott. Commission, do we have questions from the commission? Okay, we've got quorum here. Any questions from the audience or presentations on that? Okay, I was cautioned there might be a blue sheet for this. No blue sheet, Janet? Okay, thank you. With that said, Commissioners, I have a motion.
Make a motion to approve the change to chapter 23.
Okay, Commissioner Anselmi made the motion to approve Chapter 23 as presented.
I'll second that.
Commissioner Culver seconded it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Say nay. Motion passes. Thank you. Rennie, you ready to come up? Okay, thank you.
Good morning again, Commission President Price. So as you know, I started just 6 months ago here with the department, and I'm still learning a lot about all the different things that happen. And one of the things that came up kind of quickly was we hold the annual conservation art stamp contest, and that started back in 1985. It's been held every year since, and that is a contest where we invite painters to submit a painting, and other than the very first year, it's of a specific named species. And then the winner of that receives $3,500 is the current prize, and they also get their painting on the conservation art stamp. And I believe right now we have about 50,000 conservation stamps. And so at one point it was 200,000. So it's a prestigious contest and has a lot of notoriety around the country among the people who like to compete in those kind of contests. And there's also the duck stamp contest nationally. And so there's a lot of interest in these contests. And unfortunately, what we've seen in the last few years is kind of a steady decline in the number of entrants or paintings that we receive. And so we thought about that a little bit and trying to figure some things out. And one thing President Price brought up was that the requirement to enter that contest is that you have to be a professional painter. And we say that the definition of professional is someone who has been paid for one of their paintings. And so that's in the guidelines for the contest. And we have thought about removing that and maybe trying to figure out a way to get some more people to enter, and then also to open it up and give some youth in the state a chance to compete in this contest, or the Wyoming one. There's also a youth duck stamp contest that goes on nationally, but this would be for this specific contest. And so that was what I wanted to just let you know about, that we were thinking about making that change, and hear any of your thoughts on that. There's a couple of options really. One is just to strike the word professional, so anybody can enter. And what would happen is I believe it was in 2000, we had the bison was the species, and we had 300 entrants that year. So that was a lot, and it was essentially too much. And so we have said in the contest rules since that we would not necessarily display every painting that we receive. So if for some reason this becomes very popular again, and the contest for the 2017 stamp is going to be a mallard duck, and that one we expect quite a bit of interest in that species. So we'll probably get quite a few entrants next year. The contest is, and the reception for the contest is held in April every year. And so next April we'll have the mallard duck, and we can open that one up. The rules aren't out for that one, so we could open that up to anyone. So that's one option, is just to say anybody can enter. And if we get a whole bunch, we can display probably the top 100 or so. And then the other thing we were thinking about was whether or not we would just have a targeted contest for youth. And Wyoming youth, I think, would be the ideal target, because one of the requirements of the contest is that you paint the species in its Wyoming habitat. So if you enter, and I think this year it was the swift fox, and so if you were painting the swift fox in its Colorado habitat, you weren't eligible to win. And so anyway, it's kind of a neat learning opportunity, and I think especially for Wyoming kids, we could do that. So wanted to hear your thoughts on if you thought we should really pursue that, or if we're on the right track here with this. One thought is we go to the Arts Council and work with them on the youth contest, because they've expressed some interest in teaming up with us on that kind of thing. So that's kind of what we're thinking is that we will at least strike the term professional, and that way high school students can enter if they're interested, and anyone can enter. And then the other thing would be to go forward with more of a targeted youth contest that would be in collaboration with this. I think we would want to run it at the same time for staff purposes. So it's a neat undertaking of several divisions come together to work on this contest every year, and it was really fun to be around this year. So I don't want to create too much extra work for the people who do run this, but I think we can easily accommodate a youth contest, and the Arts Council could be a big help.
Okay, Randy, thank you. I did kind of, I guess, give Randy the impetus for this. Now, the reason is my wife has a friend who's a professional painter. You may know her, Kay Meeks. She was the Artist of the Year about 4 years ago for Wyoming. She's a Wyoming artist. She teaches an art school for kids, young people. And I think she said they've won the Duck Stamp Award twice, which is pretty good. This is the national.
Yeah.
And yet they're kind of excluded from this because the kids are not professional. They're very good. And so I brought this up to Randy, and he said, well, let's see what we can do with it. Our applicants are declining. So with that said, I would appreciate, any comments, and I think Randy would appreciate some guidance if we have it.
Mr. President.
Commissioner Crank.
My nephew lives in Pinedale, and his daughter, I think, has gone all the way to the finals for the National Duck Stamp Contest. So we have some incredibly talented young people that love to paint wildlife. So I'd urge that for the next contest that we get rid of the word professional, let anybody apply that wants to. And, secondly, I don't know, maybe we have a separate youth contest, but I want to make sure, I think it's important that if we have talented youth that aren't professional, that they can participate in the regular contest and also the youth contest. I mean, it's a great interrelationship between wildlife and our youth, and you know what I think is exactly in our wheelhouse, and we should encourage them to do that as much as possible. So I'd hope the next rules are modified so that anybody can apply. And you know, heck, if we have 500 entries, we can figure that out. That'd be a great thing for us.
Exactly.
Okay, I think we have the authority, we can change that. So with that in mind,
I'd move that we change the rules and strike the word professional, allow anybody to apply.
I second that.
okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Crank, second by Commissioner Rail.
President
Can we-
of the Commission, it's not in any policy other than just the written guidelines. So we can just go forward and do that. So if with that, if you want to make give us that guidance, we'll just do that. It's not in a commission policy. It's only in staff in the rule book we put out for the contest. So we can do that.
So we've got a motion and a second.
That would, so we'll, just so you know where we'll make the change.
I'm
We'll
going
just be
to
in the-
allow questions from the,
Can I make a friendly amendment to the motion that this become commission guideline?
do you accept that, Commissioner Crank?
Sure, I think even though, you know, it's just in their guidebook, I think we can direct the department.
Right.
It'd be commission direction.
Yeah. Commission direction or.
Okay,
I think we can direct the department to take certain actions. So I know it's not a formal rule and we don't need to take formal action, but I think we should direct them to make that change in the rules for the upcoming stamp contests. And
you know, as I understand it, if you accept.
I do accept it.
Okay, with that on the table, any more discussion among the commission? Okay.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I would be really interested when you do make this change and take the word professional out. If you get any blowback from the professionals, if they're obviously going to be competing with some extremely talented young people, I would be curious at some point if you get blowback from maybe the professionals. I don't know.
Absolutely. We'll let you know how that's received, but I think this just opens it up to a larger group, and the prize money doesn't change. The specifications on the painting size doesn't change, anything like that. So I have the expectation that this should be okay, but we can report back to you in essentially a year after we've run the next contest.
Yeah, and Mr. President, one other comment. You mentioned it, that a separate youth contest possibly, which is kind of an interesting idea in that a youth does not need a conservation stamp when they purchase a youth hunting or fishing license. But if we could get through senior high school talented kids to enter a contest to paint something, whatever you guys choose, and pick one of those, make them a stamp. I'm assuming this isn't going to be too cost prohibitive as far as printing a stamp that they don't have to buy. But when you do buy a youth license, you get this stamp gratis as a something. And the winner of that, you know, I don't want to throw any figures out here, but those lifetime licenses are pretty cool. Yeah, so I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunity to engage the kids up through maybe their senior high school, aside from the standard contest. Just food for thought. I know you guys don't have anything to do, so it would help if you put something else on your plate to kind of keep the things going.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Are you finished, Commissioner Clark?
Oh, yeah, I better be
Okay,
done now.
thank you. Let's just go ahead with the motion that Commissioner Frank has made. Call that. And then Commissioner Clouda, maybe you can follow up with Rennie, and pursue your thoughts further. How's that?
Oh, I plan on it.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Thank you. That's a direction.
President Price, Commissioners, and Director Talbot. Just like to introduce the next speaker, Phil Mathias, who'll be giving you an introduction in native mussels of Wyoming. As you may have remembered from our orientation, that mussels, crustaceans, amphibians, reptiles, and fish constitute some of the taxa, where the taxa, at least the fish division, is charged with managing. Phil comes to us with 8 years of experience in working with mussels. 4 of those, actually, the last 4 years with the department as under contract. Prior to that, he was at Central. Come on up, Phil. Prior to that, he was at, and I asked that because I'm going to make a mistake on jabbing. Okay. Prior to that, he was at Central Michigan, where he did his graduate work, and will, I guess, as soon as your major professor comes back from sabbatical, then you'll defend your thesis. Is that right? Okay. And prior to that, he got his undergraduate work at the University of Toledo. So with that, wow. Okay. Oh, and I promise not to call him the muscle man. So just so you know.
Okay. Thank you, Phil. Appreciate it. Go ahead.
President Price, members of the commission, and Director Talbot. I'm here to talk about Wyoming's native freshwater mussels. I guess I was going to start. I brought a few in and pass them around just in case you guys aren't familiar. These are like chuckles yesterday, I guess.
These are former residents.
Yeah. So, kind of some of our bigger ones.
Yeah.
They're labeled inside, but the one's a giant floater and one's a white heel splitter, and both of those are known from the Belle Fourche River. I also have one I'll pass around that it's from Indiana actually, but it has muscle plugs sticking out of it. So, button.
Wow. What does that look? Same as this one?
With that, kind of do a little overview of where mussels fall taxonomically. You hear a lot about zebra mussels with their invasive species program, and a little bit about the Asian clam. Well, the native mussels are part of the Unionoida. It's a superfamily, and then there's 2 families within that in Wyoming, and they have a lot more complex life cycle. So what is a freshwater mussel? It's a bivalve, and which means it has 2 halves, so it's 2 shells. They're sedentary filter feeders, so they actually clean and clear up the water. They eat bacteria and algae and plankton. There's about 300 species known in North America, and of those, most of them are in the southeast. The map's a little bit old, from about 1995, but Alabama's a hot spot for mussels, about 175 species there, whereas Wyoming only has 7 species in the 2 different families, Margaritiferae and Unionidae. And Margaritiferae is a very old family of mussels, and around maybe 800 million years old, and Unionidae is a little bit newer, but still around 300 million years old. Of the 300 species known in North America, about 70% of those are imperiled. They are either extinct or imperiled at national or state level. Over 40 of those are listed under the ESA as threatened or endangered. So most of those, though, are endemic drainages in the southeast, a lot of the Gulf of Mexico drainages. So a lot of people refer to these as clams, and the difference between a clam and a mussel is they have byssal threads. More commonly, people know that the threads that you'd see here, that's a zebra mussel at the bottom. They actually have those throughout their life, and they attach to hard surfaces. And that's where the problems come with clogging infrastructure, such as water intakes and dams. Well, native mussels have byssal threads, but only when they're juvenile, just for maybe the first year or 2 when they're really small. And you can kind of see them here, and this one's actually, we're holding it up by the thread, and then there's a little bit of thread. It's hard to see on the screen, but they lose these once they get big enough. And as you can see, the shells get fairly large, so they don't need to hold themselves to the substrate. They kind of just are self-sustaining at that point. So they, as I mentioned, they have a very complex life cycle. They use a host fish as one of their stages of reproduction. So the male will release his sperm into the water column, and the female will uptake it in her gills, and she uses her gills for reproduction, for breathing, and for feeding. And she'll brood the young, the fertilized eggs, in her gills until they're mature enough to be released. They use several different techniques to release their juveniles, and a lot of it deals with host fish attraction. So they can, there's, depending on the species, some have a very intricate lure that can look like a crayfish or a fish or any other invertebrate. Some actually grab onto a host fish and will basically pump the Glochidia into the mouth where they'll attach to the gills. And then other ones have little packets of larvae that they'll spit out, and then a fish will see it, think it's food, and bite it. And these little packets are kind of charged, like have a little bit of pressure behind them. So when the fish bites it, it'll more or less explode in their mouth, and then they'll kind of clamp on like little Pac-Man to the gills and the fins. And it is a parasitic life or stage on the host fish, but it's it doesn't harm the fish. It's kind of like just breathing in a dusty room where it's maybe harder to breathe, but you're not going to likely die from it. The next step is once they've matured, and this again is species dependent, they'll fall off, and if it's suitable substrate, they'll likely survive. But overall, from being fertilized to actually surviving into adulthood is very low. They'll produce 15,000 larvae, and about 5 of those might survive every year. So and then the cycle continues.
How long does that cycle take?
It depends on the species. So some of our faster growing ones, like that giant footer you saw, it might be a couple of weeks or a month, maybe a few weeks. And then some of our longer species, it could be months, I guess. So a couple months.
How long do they stay in the fish?
The couple weeks. So why are freshwater mussels valuable? They're ecologically valuable. They're, as I said, they filter the water. They remove remove bacteria and plankton and clear it up. They are also similar to the canary of the coal mines for streams. So they're somewhat sensitive to pollution, and certain species are more sensitive than others. They also are very long-lived. So the western pearl shell, which is found in western Wyoming, live around 100 years. So it's the third oldest living animal in Wyoming. And other ones, like the giant floater, live 7 to 10 years, 15. So, they were also used as food and material for native people for different utensils for gardening and eating. And they're very high in protein, but have very low calories. So you'd have to eat a lot of them to actually make a meal out of them. But I mean, then, as you saw, they were used for buttons historically, and now they're actually harvested in certain places for the pearl industry. And they'll take plugs similar to that, put them in a pearl-producing oyster, and then they get a cultured pearl a lot quicker than if they start from like a grain of sand or something. And then they also can tell the glacial history of North America, as the glaciers receded, what species made it up, and then for evolution, since they evolved to have that host fish, it's good evidence for that. So Wyoming, why do we care about them? We're statutorily obligated to manage all wildlife. And this includes, as Mark Bowden said, crustaceans and mollusks. And they were also included in our state wildlife action plan in 2010. They were all listed. Most crustaceans, or actually all crustaceans and mollusks, were listed with a native species status rank as unknown. And our project is helping define what those actual ranks are. So we're providing baseline data, and then recently, the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality has gone,
Hold up for a minute. Can you go ahead without your video?
are to inventory what species we have. Currently, we have 7 living species in the state. We identify where these species are and focusing on those living populations. And then we send a voucher collection every year from what we found from that field season to the University of Colorado Museum of Natural History. So our methods, we have to have perennial water. They don't do well with intermittent streams. Without water, they can't breathe. So we go in and we do visual surveys and we time those, and we get a catch per unit effort, so how many mussels we found per person hour. And we have we snorkel. So preferably we get our best field of view. We also have these fancy buckets that have a glass bottom, so you can see down the substrate where they live. And then if we can't see, and we try to avoid it if we can, just it's not very thorough, but we'll actually do a tactile search where we'll feel through the substrate and look. Once we find live mussels, we measure them for their shell length, and then certain species are sexually dimorphic, so we can tell males from females. And I have a couple examples of those in my box. But and then we take habitat data and stream width, depth, substrate. So what have we found? So this map includes all of our historic records from late 1800s to now, and I guess I should say that very few of our records are early on. Most states have records from the 19th century all the way to present, so we're actually very far behind compared to most states on what we know. So kind of go over year by year what we've done. 2011, we spent our time on the western part of the state where the California floater and western pearl shell are found. California floater and western pearl shell do coexist in the Bear River, and they're in the Bear River drainage, I should say. And then in the Snake River, we've only found western pearl shell, and western pearl shell are, I mentioned it, but they're the ones that can live over 100 years. California floaters maybe around 13 years. Very, very abundant in the Snake River for western pearl shell. California floater. 2012, we focused most of our time in the Wind Bighorn drainage, where we found fat mucket, and then we also did a little bit of work in the Snake River, again finding western pearl shell. And I should go back to this map. In the Green River, the population here at this blue dot in Sublette County, they're the only known mussel population in the Colorado River drainage upstream of the Little Colorado River in Arizona. So it's a fairly significant find, and it's very recent. In 2013, we went to the southeast portion of Wyoming. We found live cylindrical paper shell, very low numbers, and we looked for plain pocketbook, but we actually haven't found any live, and I can go over that in a minute. 2014, we went to northeast Wyoming. We found those two species I just passed around, the white heel splitter and giant floater. We've also found fat muckets in the Tongue River, and there's evidence of fat muckets in the Powder River, but due to some, I guess, rain events, we weren't able to get to those populations. So in summary, we've surveyed in the last 4 years, we've surveyed 108 sites. 35 of those have had live mussels, so about a third. We found over 6,000 live mussels, of which more than half were Western pearl shell, and most of those were in the Snake River drainage. We also found quite a few white heel splitter. Now the giant floater, it looks like a low number, it's only 2, but due to the time restraints, we didn't get up to the reservoir in the Belfouche River, so that's mainly where they're found. They're also found in Little Missouri, but we should be going back there this field season and getting our count up a lot higher. Plain pocketbook, we spent a lot of effort trying to find them in the Laramie River, where our 2 known individuals were from. One was in 1917, a live individual was found, and then one was found in 2008, but we were unable to find live, but lots of shell, pardon me, lots of shell evidence. So where are we going from here? We're going to try to monitor known populations to detect declines, and we haven't actually gone back to any of the sites to see if, when we surveyed them, have they increased, decreased, net. We also will use the administrative reports that I've written to update the SWAP to provide more refined NSS rankings, so native species status ranks, and potentially reestablish the plain pocketbook. There's been talk of that, and you can actually see in the background, this right here, I can not touch other buttons. This right here is a lure, and those they almost look like teeth. Those are little pockets of larvae, and those are like eye spots potentially of like a fish that it mimics. And we also are going to try to provide some education materials for the public, including a field guide that we're working on, maybe a poster, and updating our accounts online. So with that, I'd like to thank the U.S. Fish and Wildlife State Wildlife Grant for our funding. We've also received funding from the Wyoming Governor's ESA office. And this project really wouldn't have happened without generous landowners allowing us to come on and look for these mussels. And I'd also like to thank everyone that kind of got the project started. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Well, thank you, Phil. Commission?
You mentioned mollusks and what's the other family, or what do you call it?
Crustaceans.
What's the difference, real quick? I don't need to.
Right, so President Price, Commissioner Anselmi. So crustaceans are shrimp and crayfish, and so they're little mollusks. They're things with shells, so and slugs.
Mr. President. Phil, you said the only one I can remember is the North Platte drainage you found no mussels in the drainage, right?
President Price, Commissioner Claudia. We actually, in the North Platte drainage, we have found cylindrical paper shell. Now, the plain pocketbook is known from the North Platte drainage, but we have not found those live since 2008, and that was one individual. There's plenty of shells that we find, and the fisheries crews find near like Gray Reef Reservoir, and then in the Laramie, there's plenty of shells that we just haven't found anything live. So, and a lot of that historically was before they put Gray Reef in, the river would basically shut off, and it does almost shut off now. So the oxygen levels would get low, algae and stuff would start decomposing the oxygen from the water. There's also been numerous oil spills and gasoline spills and phosphor that have caused a lot of that decline. Laramie River, I'm not sure, but my best guess for number one reason would be it's gone dry in the past.
One other question. The pearl clam,
Western pearl shell.
Western pearl shell. If you put a grain of sand in there or one of these other things, can you grow? Somebody's going to ask it or thinking it. Can you grow a pearl?
So, President Price and Commissioner Claudia, yes. Any mollusk that has a shell can produce a pearl. Really? And most pearls actually form from parasites. So like a leech or something will get inside and actually it's a defense mechanism against that. And but yeah, sand too, you know, in the shell, it'll actually secrete a shell material around that. And a sister species to the western pearl shell in eastern North America, and actually it's found all throughout Europe too, is the eastern pearl shell. And they're very they produce a lot of pearls. We haven't found any in the, I don't look that hard. We don't open them up and look, but I know people that have found very expensive pearls in the eastern pearl shell. So.
Mr. President.
Commissioner Culver.
So the host fish, are most of these mussel species, is it a very specific host fish, or are they more opportunistic? They can use basically any fish species.
President Price, Commissioner Culver, it depends on the species of mussel. For the western pearl shell, they're specific to salmonids, so your trout and that. And other ones, most of the ones in Wyoming are kind of within a family of fish. The white heel splitter can use common carp, so along with many centrarchids. So they're actually your bass and sunfish and that. And so they're very prolific. So just because carp are so prolific, and yeah, for the most part, the ones in Wyoming are generalists. But you do have ones in the eastern U.S. that actually have to have a specific species of fish, and those are the ones that actually will capture that fish. And if a lot of it has to do with they grip on so tightly that they'll actually crush the head of other species of fish. So it has to have a strong head. So, and the one I'm talking about, it's called a snuff box, and it uses a log perch as its host fish.
Yes. And what has happened in other states with invasive mussels? What's happened to the natives?
President Price and Commissioner Culver, the invasives actually, since they are a hard surface, and Great Lakes especially, there's been a lot of research, and they basically suffocate the individual. They get so numerous on the, in the hundreds on one of those shells that they just outcompete them for food. The zebra mussels are a lot more efficient in filtering the water than the native.
That's what I wondered, how much of a danger they posed for us.
They do actually pose quite a bit.
Pretty interesting.
More commissioner questions. I do have a couple of questions. The mussels, how do they move upstream? They're pretty much stationary.
Right.
I think I know, but I would ask you.
Sure. So yeah, President Price, they actually, because they have that host fish, they can disperse upstream. So our zebra mussels and Asian clams that are invasive or in the U.S., they have a free swimming larvae. So the male releases sperm, female uptakes it, they brood their young, they release free swimming larvae. So if they were to get into a system, they're likely not going to move upstream unless there's some other vectors, such as humans or like humans. Now these native mussels, because they use that host fish, the native mussel itself maybe only, once it's an adult, maybe only moves a meter in its whole life. Well, the host fish, and this is how they've evolved, is so they can migrate, or I shouldn't say migrate, but they disperse upstream. So.
Okay. Are any of these mussels that we have native to Wyoming edible?
So I get that question a lot. It's the most common. So technically, yes, they are edible. As I said, they're very low calories. For a family of 2 adults and 3 children, you would have to eat around, that family would have to eat around 350 to 400 mussels a day to sustain the caloric intake. And that's just of a larger species. Now, would you want to eat them? Probably not. I've heard they taste like a muddy rubber boot. They also sit in the water for 30 years, 100 years. They're filtering that water, but they can't select what they're uptaking. So we have a lot of the mercury in fish that has kind of become a hot issue. Well, we haven't tested them, but I would imagine they have the same issues.
Have you ever tested for mercury in them?
We haven't, no.
On a test, that'd be interesting. I guess one last question. You call them floaters, giant floaters and stuff. Why are they called floaters?
So yeah, there's a few, President Price, there's a few species that are known as floaters. A couple distinguishing things. They're a lot thinner shell. They don't have a heavy teeth, as we call them. Actually, they have no teeth. And they live in really kind of mucky, really fine sediment that, you know, if you were to step on, you'd probably sink up to your waist. Well, they basically will float in the substrate. So,
And floating, I thought of them bobbing down.
yeah,
the top of the
I've heard
creek.
that they're so light that when they start, if they die and start decomposing, they'll float on the surface of the water when the gases build up.
Okay, well, thank you, Bill. Are there any questions, other questions from the commission? I guess the audience have any questions at this point? Thank you very much. I appreciate it. We have Steve Tessman. I believe he comes up. Do we have a presenter for Steve? We don't. Come on up, Steve.
I do.
Okay. No, I think it's a good idea. I was planning on a break at this point, but then excuse me, go ahead and work on things. We'll take about a 15-minute break at this point, okay?
Bang that gavel. That'll teach him.
Yeah, Aaron would really give it a good whacking.
I would too.
But we need to get going. It's getting late. We're getting tired. People want to talk.
I ain't talking. Yeah.
Steve, I think we'll give you your chance. Oh,
Interesting
excuse me,
man.
Scott
I had a chance
wants
to
to take a minute here,
Interesting
okay?
guy.
Well, good morning again, Mr. President, Director Talbot, Commissioners. It's my honor to introduce Mr. Steve Tessman. He's our staff biologist for the Game and Fish Department in the Wildlife Division. Steve's a 34-year veteran of the department and quite involved with the Joint Ventures program. And this morning he's going to talk about the regional wetland plans and bird habitat conservation partnerships.
Great, Steve.
Mr. President, Commissioners, Director Talbot, thank you for having me here today. So I'm standing here in my role as the chair of the Wyoming Bird Habitat Conservation Partnership, or State Conservation Partnership for short. And my purpose here today primarily is to introduce a series of regional wetland conservation plans that our membership has developed over the past 2 to 3 years. However, it struck me that we've really never discussed our relationship with the joint ventures and what the joint ventures are and what they do. And so for a good part of the first part of my presentation, I'd like to focus on that. And then toward the end, I'll introduce the wetland plans and a little bit of information about them. The two joint ventures that serve Wyoming are the Intermountain West and the Northern Great Plains. And I'm going to primarily focus on the Intermountain West because they cover most of the state and nearly all of the area where we've been doing our work. So first of all, what is a joint venture? A joint venture is a self-directed partnership of agencies, organizations, industry, individuals, and others that has taken on the responsibility of implementing one or more national or international bird conservation plans and has received general acceptance among the bird conservation community for that responsibility. They accomplish their work primarily by and through the state conservation partnerships, by helping state conservation partnerships build capacity in terms of boots on the ground, technical support, and leveraging funding to do habitat work on the ground. Joint ventures, most of them are recognized by the Fish and Wildlife Service, and their administrative staff is funded by the Fish and Wildlife Service. It's a fairly modest amount of funding. It's basically enough to cover the salary of a single joint venture coordinator and possibly an assistant coordinator. Some joint ventures are better funded than others. The Intermountain West joint venture actually has a fairly large staff, including a science staff and a media staff as well. So they do get a little bit more money from the service than do others. However, the vast majority of the funding and resources that joint ventures need to do their work is up to the joint venture coordinator to obtain through various means. And our Intermountain West joint venture coordinator, Dave Smith, is very adept at doing that, just that. So this is a map of the 18 habitat joint ventures that exist across the United States. The Intermountain West joint venture is by far the largest. It covers all or portions of 11 western states. And as I mentioned, it's one of the top 2 or 3 best funded joint ventures. There are also 3 species-specific joint ventures not shown here that deal with Arctic nesting geese, black ducks, and sea ducks. But these are the 18 habitat joint ventures, which are the ones that we deal with. So the mission of the Intermountain West joint venture is to conserve priority bird habitats through partnership-driven science-based projects and programs. And they do that by bringing people and organizations together to leverage technical and financial resources, building on our collective ability and capacity to achieve meaningful conservation on the ground. The Intermountain West was one of the very first joint ventures that was formed in the country. And the earliest joint ventures were actually born out of the North American waterfowl management plan, and their purpose was to implement habitat conservation under that plan. And the funding source for that conservation work was the North American Wetlands Conservation Act. The North American Wetlands Conservation Act is currently authorized, the congressional appropriation for funding is authorized at a level of up to $50 million, but in recent years it's been reduced to more like $35 to $38 million. And NACA money is awarded through a grants program. There's two grants programs. There are standard U.S. grants, which can be up to $1 million, very competitive, very difficult to obtain. And then there are small grants, which can be up to $75,000 for smaller projects, and those are considerably easier to compete for. As I said, the earliest joint ventures focused on waterfowl and wetlands. However, the other bird conservation initiatives in North America really liked that joint venture model. And so in 1999, a decision was made to expand the scope of the Intermountain West and other joint ventures to include all bird conservation. And the other three national bird plans are the U.S. Shorebird Conservation Plan, North American Landbird Conservation Plan, and the North American Waterbird Conservation Plan. So now we're dealing with 4 plans instead of just one. However, 3 of the 4 bird groups are wetland-associated birds. And so there's a lot of overlap there, and a lot of the conservation work that benefits one of those groups benefits the others as well. As far as terrestrial birds go, one of the major funding initiatives that has come about in recent years is the Sage Grouse Conservation Initiative. And the Intermountain West joint venture was tapped to help organize that and increase capacity to implement projects on the ground under the Sage Grouse Conservation Initiative, which was funded at $198 million from 2015 through 2018. The Intermountain West joint venture received $9.3 million to work on capacity through what they call the Strategic Watershed Action Team. And that's the entity that where all these, the 24 odd cooperative NRCS sage grouse positions are being funded, is through this Strategic Watershed Action Team. And that's pretty much the Intermountain West joint venture's role in that. They have approached our state partnership about engaging in the sage grouse initiative. To this point, we have opted not to for a couple of reasons. One being that we feel it will dilute our efforts, which are primarily focused at wetland conservation and riparian habitat conservation. And 2, because in Wyoming, at least, we feel that there are many other entities at all levels that are already dealing with the sage grouse issue, right up to and including the governor's office. So again, we've opted not to engage in that. The major habitat types that the Intermountain West focuses on are wetlands and riparian habitats, grasslands, and sagebrush steppe through the Sage Grouse Initiative. So each joint venture has prepared an implementation plan to guide the partnerships in terms of the priority areas for doing habitat conservation work. And that's the most important part of these plans is this process of, it's called strategic habitat conservation, the process of prioritizing the most important areas where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck by investing in habitat conservation work. And the Intermountain West joint venture, this is their 2013 implementation plan. This is the 3rd iteration of that plan. The original 2005 plan focused solely on waterfowl. And the hallmark of this plan is that it's been expanded to encompass the other 3 bird conservation initiatives, shorebirds, waterbirds, and landbirds. Those are the core portions of the implementation plan. Each of those chapters is organized about a standard format. Basically, they present current status information, habitat and population status information, identify the key habitat areas, conservation objectives for those areas. They identify threats and limiting factors that may impede progress toward achieving those conservation objectives. And of course, then they recommend specific conservation approaches. So going back to wetlands again, because that's the focus of our partnership, this is a map of the priority wetland areas that the Intermountain West joint venture has identified in their, within their administrative boundary. There are 2 wetland complexes that they focus the majority of their technical administrative capacity on. And that's Northeast California, Southern Oregon, and then the Great Salt Lake marshes and the Lower Bear River marshes area. And about 60% of their capacity with respect to wetlands is devoted to just those two areas. The remaining areas then receive about the other 40% of their capacity. So in Wyoming, the focal areas that they've identified in our state include Greater Yellowstone, Snake River, Salt River, Upper Green, Bear River, Laramie Plains or Basin, and Goshen Hole. So now let's step down to the Bird Habitat Conservation Partnership. We serve as an implementation framework or network under the Intermountain West Joint Venture. We're the boots on the ground, so to speak, to get projects done in Wyoming. And our mission is to facilitate habitat conservation planning and projects to help achieve priority state, regional, and continental objectives. Our specific objectives, again, are to focus primarily on wetlands and riparian habitats, but we've left the door open and to coordinate with other terrestrial bird initiatives and conservation efforts as appropriate. Our partnership is comprised currently of 41 members representing 15 agencies and conservation organizations and also 2 private citizens. And their logos are all pictured on this page. So our statewide wetland conservation strategy was begun in the 2005-6 timeframe. And about that time, we funded a project, or a project was funded, to identify the wetland complexes of the state of Wyoming and to further prioritize those into the most important complexes in which to focus our conservation efforts. And that project was called a geospatial assessment on the distribution, condition, and vulnerability of Wyoming's wetlands. They published a final report in 2009. Our plan was then finalized in 2010. And again, in terms of strategic habitat conservation, the most important aspect of that was to identify the key focal areas where we need to concentrate our efforts. This is a map of Wyoming showing all of the wetland complexes identified in the TNC study. Each of those outlined areas is based on a density rule of an average density of 1 wetland per square kilometer. Obviously, we're not going to take on all of that. So they applied a number of filters addressing species diversity and composition, relative intactness or integrity of the wetland areas, and relative degree of threat to those areas to neck this down into the most important wetland areas. And they came up with 32, shown on this map. And then they applied even more stringent criteria to come up with 6, which we felt was a manageable number for us to take on. And those 6 included Snake River, Wind River, Upper Green, Bear River, Laramie Plains, and Goshen Hole. However, being a partnership, we had individuals who wanted to work in some other wetland complexes. So they identified 4 additional complexes, which we added in, where we are also doing some considerable amounts of work. Salt River, Little Snake River, Red Desert, Jackmore Hills, and then this Northeast Wyoming complex, which is the only complex that's within the administrative boundary of the Northern Great Plains Joint Venture. So kind of our operating premise as a conservation partnership is that conservation directed from the top down doesn't tend to be real effective. You know, you can come up with all kinds of national, international plans that tell you what you ought to be doing, where you ought to be doing it, who ought to be doing it, and so forth and so on. But conservation really gets done as a grassroots effort, an organic effort from the ground up. And you have to have energetic people on the ground who have a regional or local interest in getting projects done in their own backyard. And so that's the energy that we tap into to get work done in our partnership. And to date, it's been relatively effective. So one of the things that we've done is to give those people, those regional folks who have this regional interest, ownership, and to enable them is we ask them to each draft a regional wetland conservation plan covering their region. So out of those 10 areas, we have 7 plans completed and ready to publish to date: Upper Green, Snake River, Red Desert, Bear River, Upper Little Snake Valley, Laramie Plains, and Goshen. We have 3 other plans that are in various stages of incompleteness, I guess. The Wind River plan is actually close to being done. The Salt River plan draft was submitted. It's being edited. And the Northeast Wyoming plan, the coordinator for the Northern Great Plains joint venture was going to do that, but didn't get it completed before he retired. And so we've actually taken that in-house, and we're going to complete it over the course of the next year. So rather than get into a lot of detail about what the contents of all these plans are, I think the most instructive part or aspect would be to focus in on the recommended conservation strategies. And so what I've done is I've gone through all the plans and put in a couple that aren't done yet, and tallied up the primary conservation needs that have been identified in each of those plans. And pictured here in the darker green highlight are the things that we think we feel as a group that we have a degree of influence over, that they're within our sphere of influence. And then in the lighter green are things that we feel probably lie more outside our sphere of influence. So the primary need that's been identified throughout the state is the need to increase conservation delivery capacity, more boots on the ground, better funding, better technical support. And when you compete for a lot of these grants, especially a standard U.S. grant, you know, if you're going after $1 million grant, you need $1 million in match, either in kind or direct match, monetary match. But you don't compete. You're not competitive unless you have at least $2 million in match. $2 million is a lot of money to come up with on a local scale in Wyoming. And that's probably been one of the major hurdles that we've been dealing with. So along with increasing capacity, of course, goes building local partnerships to support conservation. Some of the specific conservation measures that we advocate are conservation easements, maintaining traditional agricultural uses of the land, open landscapes, and then on a more localized basis, wetland restoration, creation and enhancement type projects, and additional resources to manage created wetlands as well, and watershed health, riparian habitat improvement. A couple of the things that we feel lie more outside of our sphere of influence, and we don't consider our organization to be an advocacy organization. We consider us to be a let's do projects on the ground organization. So some of the things that we wouldn't necessarily get into are mitigating development impacts, strengthening wetland protection laws and regulations, county zoning and subdivision laws, water rights, invasive plants, and those sorts of things. So here's our funding achievements since 2007. Having completed these plans, we now consider ourselves to be completely into our implementation phase, but we have been doing implementation all along. And some of our major accomplishments in 2012, we were successful in obtaining Wyoming's first $1 million standard NAWCA grant in the Upper Green River Basin. We also were very successful at obtaining outside funding from the Ruby Pipeline mitigation funds. Those mitigation funds were supposed to be dedicated to projects in 5 states, and there was $2.5 million. And Wyoming was successful in getting over $1.5 million of that $2.5 million for application in Wyoming. So all told, to this point in time, we've succeeded in bringing in about $3.8 million for wetland conservation in the state, most of which has come from outside the state. With that, I'll take any questions that the commission may have.
Thank you, Steve. I guess first we'll ask the commission. I do have a blue slip on this, so we'll address that after we've had the commission make their. Commissioner Inselmi.
What was that NAWCA grant for the Upper Green Conservation Easement, $1 million?
Mr. President and Commissioner Inselmi, the majority of the $1 million was earmarked for large conservation easements in the Upper Green. I can't recall the exact name of the properties. I know one of them fell through, and they're currently working on a replacement project that they've already identified. A large chunk of the money went to a cottonwood restoration project that was completed on Sietskitty National Wildlife Refuge, and I think that was something on the order of $150,000 or $170,000. But the vast majority of it was earmarked for conservation easements.
So your working group does this. This doesn't go through our Butch Parks. This goes through your partnership, I guess, or whatever we call it there?
I'm not sure if I'm really equipped to answer that. Susan Patla took the lead on the Upper Green NACA. I know part of that was done through the Conservation Fund and some of the other entities that have been involved. I don't believe that the Game and Fish Department is holding any of those easements. In fact, I'm sure of it.
Steve, I didn't know, maybe I missed part of this. But I guess I'll ask for other questions first before I'll save my question till last. Any other questions?
I have one question
Mr.
for
Kohler?
you. Steve, the Wyoming Game and Fish, you said does not, we don't help fund the either one of the what's the terminology I'm looking? Either one of the two joint ventures that cover Wyoming. We don't help fund either one of those?
Mr. President, Commissioner Culver. Not only do we not fund the Intermountain West joint venture, they actually have paid for all of our travel to attend their meetings out of state. So that's a considerable benefit. And as well, they have a capacity grants program. I think you may have seen it on the chart. We get $15,000 a year to apply toward some aspect of building capacity to do more work in Wyoming. And some years we've succeeded in getting 2 of those grants per year. So the Northern Great Plains joint venture, however, is a different arrangement. We actually at one time sat on their board and had a state representative on there that attended as well. We actually did pay them an annual fee, I guess, for lack of a better term, membership fee of about $5,000 or $6,000 a year for several years. We discontinued participation in the Northern Great Plains because we hadn't seen any on-the-ground results from that participation.
Okay, I was thinking that Game and Fish helped fund them at one time. I know I used to attend some of their meetings and I've worked with them some, and I think it was Larry, wasn't it?
Larry Roberts.
Yeah, he was our representative.
Okay. Nelson sat on that board.
Thank you.
Other questions from commission? Okay, I do have a commission. It's a little bit, or question. It's a little bit more of a personal question. This North Cottonwood Ranch easement. Where is that at exactly? You know?
As I recall, the North Cottonwood easement is the one that fell through. Is that true?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
One of those easements was originally intended to be funded through the knockout dollars, and it fell through, and the Conservation Fund found alternative funding to close it. I thought that was the North Cottonwood, or at least a portion of the North Cottonwood. And so they're looking for an alternative property and I'm not absolutely positive about this, but they're looking for alternative funding or rather an alternative easement opportunity to use the NACA money.
Okay. I'm wondering, is Butch Parks available here?
Yeah, right.
No, he's gone.
He's gone. Because we're transferring some money from up there somewhere down on the Fontanelle. And I was wondering if there's a chance that's it.
I think it is, Charles. Thinking, no?
Scott doesn't think it is. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Anselmi.
So how can we find out about this? You list this as money you got, but then you're saying you didn't get it. So who do we talk? How do you find? I'm curious about this.
Well, we have the money, we just haven't spent it yet, I guess is the best way to put that.
So who's we?
Well, again, Susan Patla has taken the lead on that Upper Green knockout.
Department employee or no?
Yes.
Susan.
She's our non-game biologist in Jackson. So yeah, we have the money in hand. We can keep the money with justification. We can keep it for up to 5 years. Each year we have to submit a justification to retain it. I think it's about $500,000 out of the million that hasn't been spent. I understand they have a viable property right now that they're working on, so it's very likely that we will be successful in spending that money.
What's her last name again?
Patla, P-A-T-L-A.
Thank you, Steve.
Any more comments from the commission? Any comments from the public? Well, Steve, thank you very much for the presentation. Scott, come on up. We'll get this is the one I have the blue slip for.
Okay, very good. Mr. President, Director Talbot, Commissioners, the next presentation will be, as I mentioned yesterday, Ian Tater. He's our statewide habitat manager, and he's going to give the commission a more detailed update. I just glossed over yesterday, but he'll give a more detailed update on our mule deer initiative, our statewide effort with our 7 local groups that are working with the department to formulate plans. As you can see there, a map on the handout. They're formulating plans to address mule deer habitat opportunities, and I'll let Ian go into some more of the specifics.
Okay, thank you, Ann. Just go ahead.
Thank you, Scott, for the introduction. Good morning, President Price, Director Talbot, members of the commission. I'm excited to be here today. I'd like to discuss the department's statewide mule deer initiative with you. I'd like to start with a little background on how we got here. As you're well aware, mule deer in Wyoming and throughout the West are in decline. And several years ago, in response to this decline, the department began working on the Wyoming Range Mule Deer Initiative. This was followed shortly thereafter by the Platte Valley Mule Deer Initiative. These are areas where increased emphasis on mule deer management was identified by the public and supported by the department. As a result of the inertia and success realized in the Wyoming Range and Platte Valley, coupled with the need to help mule deer statewide, the department has decided to take the next step. That next step is the statewide mule deer initiative. Last year, each region, including those that were a part of the original mule deer initiatives, was asked to come up with an additional herd or herds to take before the public and discuss as a mule deer initiative. As an overview of the 8 game and fish regions in the state, 3 chose a working group format, 3 chose a mini collaborative format, and 2 of the regions chose an informational data sharing format. Really, there's some subtle differences in those format types, but they all share one thing in common. They're geared toward listening to our constituents and allowing public input toward mule deer management. This input will be summarized into a management recommendations document for each regional MDI, and this document will guide management efforts and assist the department in developing a list of actions on the local level to benefit mule deer. Many members of the commission have participated in this process at the regional level. My presentation today is simply an update on the overall MDI effort. With that said, I'd like to go through each regional MDI and discuss some highlights and answer any questions you may have. As you can see on the screen, we have a map of the areas. And when it's displayed visually like that, it's really pretty amazing how much country is covered under these mule deer initiatives. You can see our original mule deer initiative in far western Wyoming, the Wyoming Range. You can also see the Platte Valley in the southeastern portion of Wyoming, and then you can see all the ones that have come since then. And when you look at it, it really does cover quite a bit of ground. So with that, I'd really like to start with the Green River region. So if you guys will follow along with me, I think the very first one on the handout is the Green River region. And so what I'd like to do is just go over each regional mule deer initiative and talk about where we are in terms of the overall process and update you one by one. So with that, we'll start with the Green River region. The Green River region selected the Baggs mule deer herd. They also selected a working group format, and so far they've conducted 7 public meetings, and they've really focused their efforts on hunting season structure and habitat improvements to mitigate for energy development. they're at the point where they feel like they can begin formulating those recommendations into a document. And so they've made pretty good strides there and continue to do so. And so as part of this overall update, I would like to mention that certainly none of the regions are to the point where they've formulated a final document. Most of them are still in the process of going to the public and seeking input and trying to formulate what that final product is going to look like. And so Green River is no different in that regard. If there aren't any questions on the Green River initiative, I'd like to move down to the Lander region. So Lander selected two different herd units. They selected the Southwind River and the Sweetwater herd. So you can see those displayed on the map there. They're adjacent to each other in the south part of the state, south center part of the state. They also selected a working group format, and so far they've held 11 meetings over the last 11 months. They've been very busy in Lander. The working group has gone so far as to present the department with 3 short-term recommendations to be included in the 2015 hunting season structure, which you approved yesterday. And so some of those include the removal of antler point restrictions within their area. So there's quite a few areas listed there, as you can see. Also, one of the proposals that they brought forward was to restrict youth deer hunting seasons to the limitations published in regulation. We took that back, and the Wildlife Division decided to leave that one alone, leave it the way it was. But certainly it's well within their scope to provide any and all recommendations, and that was one that they brought forward. The last one that the working group in the Lander region brought forward was to open the general whitetail deer seasons on October 1st. So this is additional time available for whitetail deer hunting. And so this was enacted in the packet in the hunting season structure for the Southwind River herd unit. It was not enacted for the Sweetwater herd unit due to a couple complicating factors, but certainly it was enacted in the Southwind Rivers. Since January, the working group has been developing recommendations addressing habitat and research, and they've really focused quite a bit of effort on that. And then more recently, at the past 2 meetings, they've really taken on the hunting season construct again and looked for opportunities there to provide input to the department. So the Lander working group has been making great strides and has done a lot of interaction. If there aren't any questions on Lander, I'd sure like to move on to Jackson and Pinedale.
Okay.
You said they've been focusing on habitat research. What does that mean on the ground? I mean, what are they doing?
Commissioner Crank and President Price. What that means on the ground, I may have misspoke there a little bit. They're focusing on 2 separate issues. They're focusing on research and on habitat. And so it wasn't researching habitat. It was 2 separate things. And so what that means on the ground is they're looking at opportunities to do habitat improvement projects within their herd units, and they're looking at some of the gaps in knowledge that we have in terms of research. And so that might include things like migration corridors. That might include where these animals are at certain times of the year, parturition areas, any of that sort of thing, focused on management actions that we can take as a result of that research.
Are any of Mr. President?
No, go ahead. You've got the floor.
Mountain is near and dear to my heart. You know, I saw wolves on Green Mountain last fall hunting elks. So, I mean, are any of these mule deer initiatives looking at the effects of predation, you know, with our ever expanding grizzly bear numbers and wolf numbers in areas where we've never had those type of predators before?
Commissioner Crank, President Price. Actually, it's well within the scope of the working groups or the many collaborative processes. I refer to them jointly as working groups, but certainly it is well within their parameters to look at all factors affecting mule deer, including predation. And I will point to the Platte Valley as a place where that was identified as one of the areas that they thought was limiting mule deer growth. And certainly we've allocated resources toward that.
Mr. President, if I might, I just think that's an important factor that, we have an overall decline of all of our mule deer herds. I think as these working groups work on these issues, that'd be something I would at least be interested as a commissioner to find out, is that part of the problem? I mean, is this lack of feed? Is this overhunting? Is this antler point restrictions? There are a variety of factors I think can affect any herd, but if we actually have areas where we have predation on some of these species that we've been told by the court system so far we can't manage, something I'd want to know about, and I think the department would want to know about, because it adds to our tools to try to gain management authority. We have two top of the line predators that aren't being managed. And I just think that's having a horrible effect on our ungulate herd statewide. And maybe, I don't know, but maybe that's part of our mule deer decline problem. So, such as we have input into what those working groups are doing, that'd be something I'd kind of be interested in finding out. What are the statistics, and what are those factors, and how do they affect our herds?
Commissioner Crank.
Mr. President, Commissioner, I think that Scott Smith may be coming up here to provide a little bit of insight on that particular in relation to the Wyoming range.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. President, Frank, yes. In the Wyoming range, we've partnered with the University of Wyoming Co-op, and so we've initiated a long-term Wyoming range mule deer research project. It's broken up into various components. One of the components is exactly that we're kicking off this spring, early summer, is exactly that, where we're going to go up. We have 40 radio telemetry doe deer. We'll actually follow those individuals up onto the fawning areas, and as soon as they fawn, capture their fawns, affix them with their own radio tracking devices, and then monitor the fawn survival in addition to the doe, to try to get at exactly some of the things you're talking about, what's influencing that fawn survival. This would be the first time in the state of Wyoming that we've been able to do that type of in-depth research. So just one example of, from the Wyoming range MDI, we've been able to broaden, not only looking at important habitats and how we can enhance them, but also some of the demographic issues that always come up. Why aren't our herds growing? Well, one of them is, we know we have suppressed fawn productivity, but what is causing that suppression? And so here's one instance where we hope to provide some finite answers, at least for the Wyoming range.
Okay. Scott, thank you. And I was going to comment, I had the privilege to go out with the co-op unit and put in to capture the deer. These deer had radio collars on. They've been following them for a number of years. We put bits into the does that were tested to see if they're pregnant, put bits into the does. When those fawns are born, those bits will come out and send out a radio signal. At that point, somebody goes in on that radio signal, locates the fawn, and they can identify him or her, the fawn, and then follow that to see what loss we have and why. And I had the privilege of going out and doing that. I've been following that for about 3 years now. So it's a start. Let's put it that way.
Mr. President, Commissioner Crank, one other thing I failed to mention. So in addition to this fawn study, our trophy game section is going to add a black bear component. If you recall, last year there was some concerns, or last couple of years there's been concerns about black bear predation on mule deer fawns. So we now have the resources available that we're going to go out and we're going to start collaring black bears in the same exact area that the co-op is conducting the fawn survival study. So we will be able to directly, in addition, directly look at the role black bears are playing in the whole dynamic of fawn mule deer survival in the Wyoming range. So multiple efforts ongoing that all spurred from this MDI effort.
Great. Thank you.
Mr. President.
President Cloutta or Commissioner
I think a
Cloutta.
follow-up to Commissioner Crank's comment on the predation issues, and I've attended all but maybe one or two of these MDI meetings in Lander and several here in Casper. And wolves really aren't discussed because why? I guess there's nothing you can do about them, obviously. But it's coming up next month. The Animal Damage Management Board will be meeting again and funding these county predator management boards. And I know in the Platte Valley, there's been a huge effort for coyote control, along with, I think the Wyoming Range was heavily involved in that. So those things are being addressed probably through the Department of Ag and the Animal Damage Management Board, at least the coyote control, along those same lines as what you were talking about. So a lot of it depends on those county predator management boards that are out managing the predators. So anyway, that's being done, at least the meetings that I've attended anyway. So.
Mr. President and Commissioner Cloutta, if it's okay. And I understand that, but I think you said we don't discuss wolves because we can't do anything about it. And that you're right, but I think we need that data and that research to be able to one day do something about it and add to our arsenal of why this commission should be given authority to manage the two top of the line predators that exist in Wyoming who have no management, and their numbers are, far beyond what we ever agreed to. So I think it's important that we do discuss that.
And I do agree. And I didn't mean to diss the discussion of the wolves at the MDI meetings. I think that I thought I saw Brian here and Justin, at least Brian DeBolt, who deals with these wolf issues. And I think that they're investigating every wolf sighting that comes in that has some validity, including Green Mountain. And we know they're in the southern winds. They're on the Red Desert. It's, and I think that at least up in Lander, they're investigating those sightings when they can. And yeah, I agree with you. I wasn't dissing them. I'm just saying that that just is not a topic of discussion in these MDI meetings. Predators are, but not specific to wolves at this point.
You had the question answered.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and move on, if you would, please.
Sure thing. Back to kind of the process really quickly. One of the things that I wanted to also indicate is this is, as much like Mr. Tessman indicated, this is a grassroots organic effort. And so we really need folks to come to the meetings and to support us and to provide input. And that's what we're trying to do in this entire MDI process. And so when we do that, one of the first questions that we tend to ask is, what do you see as the top 3 issues limiting mule deer productivity? And so it's been really astounding to me traveling across the state, going to many of these meetings, that it falls into 3 camps usually, and for the top 3. And it usually revolves somewhere around, and it varies region to region, but certainly 3 main themes come about. And that is habitat is potentially limiting mule deer, predators are potentially limiting mule deer, and hunting season is potentially limiting mule deer. And so we work through each of those and take however much time it takes to do that. And it's been really good. I think folks are embracing this approach, and so I just wanted to share that before I get too much further along. But if there aren't any further questions on that, I'd really like to go to continue on the Jackson-Pinedale region. So the one difference here is that because they've been doing this for so long in this part of the state, they've chosen the informational data sharing format. And so really the only difference there is that there is it's not a working group per se. It's as information needs become available directly from the public, people might say, I'd like to really hear more about predation. And so the department will come back and say, here's everything we know about predation. Here's our ongoing research. Here's what Animal Damage Board has been doing, et cetera. And so it's worked very well because we have developed a long-term relationship in that area for those herds. And so there's been quite a bit of back and forth, and that's the only, I pointed out because it's the only two herds that are utilizing that approach, but it is working. No matter which approach the regions choose, they're all appear to me at least to be working. And an example of that is over 100 people have attended these meetings, the ones that have been held in the Jackson and Pinedale regions. And most members of the public appear to be appreciative of the extensive research, habitat projects, and monitoring that is ongoing. And I will point out that since this one's been going a little bit longer, we have extensive landscape scale habitat projects that got underway in 2014. And so large acreages, we've got the NEPA out of the way, and certainly are doing lots of good work for mule deer in that part of the world. And so we've partnered with lots of folks, and that one's moving right along. All told, we have nearly 30,000 acres identified for treatment in that part of the world for primarily mule deer. Next on the list, Sheridan region. So Sheridan chose the Upper Powder River herd, and they also chose the mini collaborative process. And so Sheridan so far has held 2 meetings, and they've covered a lot of ground in those meetings and had a lot of interaction with the public. And they're getting ready to formulate their management recommendations document. And so that's the update on Sheridan. They've tried to hold these meetings, as have most folks, in the evenings to accommodate local folks to show up. These meetings have been held in KC, which is the town nearest the Upper Powder River area. And so far so good in that part of the world. Next on the list, Laramie region. Laramie region chose the Sheep Mountain herd. They also chose to embark on the mini collaborative process. And Sheridan has, this is their second mule deer initiative. So they had the Platte Valley Mule Deer Initiative. So right hot off the heels of embarking on that, they jumped right into the Sheep Mountain initiative. And so they've got a couple things in the works, and I'll highlight a few of them. They're working with the Forest Service on a predictive map for cheatgrass occurrence in the Squirrel Creek fire. That was a major fire that cut across some winter and transition range in that part of the world. And we've got a major cheatgrass issue there. So we're trying to get that under control. They've also worked with the Forest Service to fence and gate off existing winter closure areas. And they're in the process of drafting their management recommendations document. So again, Lander region is well on their way to providing a document in the end to guide future management efforts. Casper region, where we currently are, chose the Bates Hole Hat 6 herd. They chose a citizen working group format. So far, the Casper region has had 9 internal working group meetings and 1 open public meeting. The working group is now focused on developing their management recommendations document, and they're hoping to finalize that by the end of May. So they've been plugging right along. They have a local concerned hunter on their leading the charge for them, and so this is moving along quite well in the Casper region, and that affects obviously 2 hunt areas, hunt area 66 and 67. 67 is currently closed, so it really is focused on 66. Last but not least, we have the Cody region. Cody selected the Owl Creek and Matitsi herds. Again, mini collaborative, and they've so far held 5 meetings in places like Thermopolis and Matitsi, and they are in the process of formulating their draft management recommendations. A peek preview at them includes some season structure changes, and one of the things that they wanted to do early on was liberalize their white-tailed deer license issuance and start to restrict their mule deer license issuance a little bit. And some of that includes things like changes from any mule deer to antlered mule deer. That's the sort of more restrictive measures that they've taken in the short term. They are also interested in working with the BLM and other folks to develop habitat projects to benefit mule deer in that part of the world. And they are also in the preliminary stages of identifying research that would be necessary to inform future population and habitat management decisions. And so really, anytime I say research, it's near and dear to me that research translates into something that we can do on the ground. And that's where all of these folks that have brought up research are interested in doing. And so they're, again, in the middle of developing their management recommendations document. And so that takes us through all the regions. Is there any questions or anything that I can answer for the commission?
I guess I'll ask a question. Do we have other commissioners have any questions on this? On the Platte Deer initiative and in the Wyoming range in their initiative, the department, the commission has put forward some, a large chunk of money. Specifically on the Platte Valley, we put a $500,000 forward for matching. And this has been pretty successful. Our matching has been, like, we asked for 6-to-1. I think we've been running above that 7-to-1 type thing. As we progress into these other herds and initiatives, are we going to be seeing a request for similar financial incentives?
I would defer that question.
You hand it to the boss.
I knew that's what he was going to do, Mr. President. Mr. President, Director Talbot, members of the commission, we will be addressing that in July, and we're in the process now of determining exactly what that recommendation is going to be, but we will be looking for some type of a commitment from the commission, similar to what I discussed with the commission in Du Bois. So that must have been last July's meeting. Very similar to the briefing I gave the commission then, as far as what we'll be looking for a commitment out of the commission.
Okay, I thought so. Okay, thanks, Brian. And thank you. Okay, Commissioner Crank.
You said the forest, you were working, I forget, I think it was the Sheep Mountain group was working with the Forest Service to deal with the cheatgrass caused by the fire several summers ago. Are they doing anything? Is Forest Service doing anything with regard to the cheatgrass? I mean, I think you control cheatgrass by spraying, if I understand it, but are they actively trying to manage that problem in that area?
Commissioner Crank, President Price. So what the Forest Service is attempting to do in that area is they currently do not have management authority to aerially spray herbicide. And so this is a major issue for us to address this landscape scale cheatgrass issue. And so we have requested and they have complied, and they're working through a process, their NEPA document process, to allow that. There has been significant delay in that process, as you might imagine.
I'm shocked.
Because we have continually asked and hoped that at some point we would have a resolution to that, so we could proceed with the treatment jointly with the Forest Service. And I anticipate that they will join us in that treatment effort. I'm not sure who will take the lead on that, but certainly we will be engaged in that. And when we have NEPA clearance, we would proceed with treating that cheatgrass.
Thank you.
Any more questions from the commission? Okay, I have a blue sheet here for Steve Belinda. Would you please come up?
Thank you. Thank you, President Price, Director Talbot, and Commission. On behalf of the Mule Deer Foundation, we just want to thank the Wyoming Game and Fish Department and the staff and leadership that's been exhibited on this initiative. The Mule Deer Foundation has been going through somewhat of a, I won't say hibernation in Wyoming, but we had some issues with our regional director that was vacant for a while. And we now have a new regional director, Cindy Mosteller, out of the Gillette area, who will be leading MDF's charge within the state, mostly from chapter development and working with the department and other partners on project level issues. We really want to commend the department on looking at this statewide and also at the landscape level, because all too often projects were looked at that postage stamp style of approach, which may have had good benefits locally, but didn't really address the issue with the mule deer declines that have been taking place. To that end, MDF has been working with many of our partners in the state on numerous issues. One has been trying to put together a for lack of a better term, an informal mule deer coalition of the conservation groups that are all working on the same issue. And we work for two reasons, which is one, to coordinate amongst those groups so that we don't have overlapping issues, that we can talk about things internally and get on the same page, and then also get more support for what you all are doing. And the second thing is really generating that support both from our organizations and from the sportsmen and the public of Wyoming to support the department on this initiative, because it's extremely important. There's a lot coming down the pipe right now for sage grouse, and including a potentially $60 million for BLM initiative funding for sage grouse starting next fiscal year. With the overlap of sage grouse habitat and mule deer habitat, we think that the opportunity to capitalize on this funding to fund many of the projects that have been identified is right in front of us starting next year, and we're pledging to help you all take advantage of that. And then finally, I just wanted to mention that we're working on our second annual Mule Deer Summit that we will be hosting with the Muley Fanatics Foundation and the other conservation groups that are working on mule deer in coordination with the Wyoming Game and Fish's Mule Deer Working Group, internal working group, and that'll be held probably in August at a probably central part of the state. And we're going to be picking the dates very soon, but we're going to make that opportunity for you all to attend and have discussions, not just in informal, but one of the things we're talking about is how do we get sportsmen and the public more engaged with the department on this issue, because it's been extremely frustrating for me and the Mule Deer Foundation not getting our members out to these meetings that you all have been having. And so what do we need to do to maybe light that fire a little bit more? Because sometimes the best ideas are going to come from those folks that don't have professional degrees and don't get paid to do this and take time out of their way to attend it. So again, I want to thank you for your prioritization of mule deer. I really appreciate Scott taking the time and putting this issue out there with everything he has to deal with leading the department, and we're here to help.
That's a favorite government saying.
I'm not with government anymore, Charles. You know that. It's been a decade. So,
Mr. President, members of the commission, Steve, we certainly appreciate your support on that. And when we kicked off the initial Platte Valley Habitat Partnership, the initial mule deer initiative down there, Mule Deer committed $50,000 to that effort. I know that we're still working on that, but I guess I would encourage you, and you heard questions from the commission as well, that the Mule Deer Foundation be an active player in that, and certainly we would encourage $50,000 for each one of our initiatives on a statewide basis. But I just strongly encourage Mule Deer Foundation's participation in this funding-wise in Wyoming, because we certainly need the help.
Unfortunately, I don't have the ability to commit MDF. Miles would probably kick my butt if I did. But with losing a regional director, what happens is we lost our ability to have banquets and raise money that could then be spent locally. So that sort of put us into a situation where we weren't raising that money. Banquets were being delayed. So therefore, the money wasn't being generated as it had in the past. With getting the regional director on staff, filling that vacancy, and resurrecting those local banquets, we will hopefully be addressing that. I do know that I think this was a record year for MDF selling their governor's licenses. I think they generated $70,000+ for the licenses they get through the Big Game Coalition. So that money will be available through that process and hopefully be applied to a lot of what's being prioritized and identified by these local working groups. But Scott, we hear you. We're working on it and trying to get the organization to focus that fundraising onto what you all think is needed for mule deer, rather than the whole, good projects but aren't coordinated sort of approach that's been there.
Okay, you've transferred over from the Theodore Fund Roosevelt Conservation Organization, and now you're working for the Mule Deer Foundation.
Yeah, I mean, Charles, I have a I have a private consulting firm that TRCP was one of my clients. They're no longer one of my clients. And Mule Deer Foundation is. So I'm here representing the Mule Deer Foundation today.
Okay, I was trying to kind of see what your position was on this, and
I'm open to working with whomever is willing to get good things done on the ground in my capacity. So it's just contractually couldn't work it out with them this year. So.
Okay, thank you,
Mr. President.
Commissioner Crank.
I think Director Talbot was pretty gentle, but as I understand this, the Mule Deer Foundation said they would commit some funds to the Mule Deer Initiative, and those funds have never come through. So please, I know you don't have the authority.
I don't even know. I can check on the status and we
hold on a second. Maybe that's not, and I want to be fair to you. And I also want to say thank you for everything the Mule Deer Foundation does. I think, but if they committed funds, they ought to come through with them. And so you ought to convey that to Mr. Moretti or your board. I mean, $50,000, as I understand, was the commitment, is not very much to the Mule Deer Foundation on a national basis. And I would tell you, I think it's kind of unfair to, say because we didn't have a regional director, we haven't raised as much funds as we could have in Wyoming. That was a commitment, as I understand, from the National Mule Deer Foundation. And if they committed, they ought to carry through with it. So you ought to convey that to Mr. Moretti.
I'll check on that and get back to you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions? Okay.
What was your name
Steve.
again?
Steve, Belinda.
Steve.
Commissioner
Belinda.
Rao,
Belinda.
you have a question?
No, that was it.
Okay, you're just, okay. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. Joy, I have a blue sheet that's turned in for you. Please come on up.
Madam President, Commissioners, and Director Talbot. I'm Joy Bannon with Wyoming Wildlife Federation, and I just wanted to inform you that as our organization, the Federation has been involved from the beginning when we were working on, we're with the department, started the Mule Deer Initiative with the Platte Valley effort and the Wyoming Range effort. And so we were at those meetings and engaged during those. In addition, then in the most recent round of meetings and initiative work, we participated in 3 consistently, and then I think 1 other as well. We are 2 other places. So we're working in the South Wind River section, the Platte Valley, Sheep Mountain, and Bag section, as well as the Owl Creek Matitsi section. So just so you know that we as an organization, the Federation has been engaged and working with the department on those areas. And then we are working and have been one of the organizations involved in the Mule Deer Summit, where, as Steve Belinda mentioned, kicked off last year, and then we're helping again this year with that effort. So just wanted to let you know that we appreciate all the work that's been done by the department for this effort. Obviously, it's a Western iconic species that we all love and would like to maintain throughout time. So just that was an FYI. So thank you as well.
Thank you, Joy. Do you have any questions for Joy? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
With that done, I think we're done with the those things. And we're going to move John Kennedy up in time. He'll give a presentation here. This has to do with some of the commission stuff. After this, we'll break for lunch. And then we have, I think, 2 more presentations, and those times are scheduled in, so we've got to fit in with them. John, go ahead.
Mr. President, members of the Commission, Director Talbot, we're going to do agenda item 26. As the Commission knows, this agenda item was added to the agenda somewhat late in the process because of some communication issues with respect to our evaluation of some requests to appear before the Commission. So the purpose of this agenda item is to discuss the Department's protocol and the Commission's protocol for complying with Commission policy for Commission business, and that policy has been included in your packets, and you've taken a look at that prior to this discussion. And we're not going to be going into any details specific to this policy other than to say what we're currently doing through our agendas complies with that policy. I think the policy is quite broad, and I think what we're wanting to discuss
as requested by Mr. President, was how we go about with our protocol complying with that policy, because there's a lot of flexibility for us to do that in a variety of different ways. So there's been recent questions, as you know, and some issues related to getting agenda items on the agenda and specifically requesting to appear. So first, I want to say that the department doesn't believe there's a major problem in the protocol. I think if there's any problem, it's perhaps been a lack of communications with some folks, and even the department and commission have not had a lot of dialogue regarding this policy and our protocol for agendas. So I think this is going to be a healthy discussion and a good thing for us to do. But we have not had a lot of problems that, just for the benefit of the new commissioners, in the last several years, our agendas and commission meetings, I think, have been going quite well and been productive and effective, and we haven't had disagreements with respect to any agenda items or folks that want to appear before the commission. The department certainly and the commission certainly supports public engagement. The department never tries to avoid getting members of the public or any issue before you on agendas. Specifically, what we have done and what happened in terms of this meeting, just to use it as an example of some of the presentations yesterday, when we get a request to appear, we have a request to appear to the commission that we evaluate every month. We don't normally get very many of those requests to appear. Those individuals that desire to specifically have their own agenda item and name on the agenda, what happens is they contact the department. They'll contact the director's office. We'll take a look at that request, and once we discuss our protocol and how we have our agenda set up, there's usually agreement by both sides that the best way to do that's either through the call to the public that we have on our agendas or the blue sheet process. And so in most cases, we're getting requests to appear before the commission on items that are already on the agenda. And once members of the public or organizations understand that the request, our blue sheet process, allows them to identify the specific agenda item and address the commission with their input and their comments prior to you making a decision or providing direction to the department, that's an acceptable way for them to approach the commission. It makes sense to most folks. And in fact, yesterday, having a couple of standalone agenda items, which is not a problem. We're not expressing concerns with that. But those two items were already on the agenda. And so in the commission, as we've done in past meetings, has asked for that public input, and we took a variety of blue sheets yesterday and request to provide comments on regulations before you took action on that, and it worked out quite well. So I just bring that up as yesterday, as we have this dialogue right now, maybe think back at how that went yesterday with separate agenda items, et cetera, and how the blue sheet process works. So we currently have on our agendas, as you know, a couple of call to the publics. Those are normally at the end of the day. And we have our blue sheet process, as you know, where those that want to fill those out can address the commission by agenda item. So I think what, and Mr. President, members of the commission, I'll let you steer this discussion, but I think we just need to have some open dialogue right now about where you would like us to go in terms of complying with that commission policy. How do you like the department to handle development of agendas and specifically request to appear before the commission?
John, I'm going to ask a question here, and we've been doing this. Usually we get a presentation, ask the commission if they have any comments or discussion, and then time depending, we say, is there any comments at each item? Any comments from the floor? And I think that comments from the floor, that gives the public opportunity to comment at different items as they go. But if time is tight and they have not turned in a blue sheet, they have the opportunity to turn in a blue sheet, and this gives them the opportunity to come and present their point to the commission. But if we call from the floor, if time's not real tight, is that a problem, or do you think that's acceptable?
Mr. President, members of the commission, I don't think we've experienced any real serious problems with that in the last several years, at least. We've been able to manage that time effectively.
I don't think so either. The only time it could become a problem if we have a lot of people all of a sudden want to come up. And I don't think we're obligated to allocate that time if we don't have that available. Am I correct in that?
Correct.
Okay. I just want to be sure, but I think they ought to have a chance to address the commission if we have the time. But if we're going to squeeze other people we have scheduled for the meeting, if we're going to pressure them, then we don't have the time, and I don't think we're obligated to provide that to the audience at that time.
Mr. President, members of the commission, I think that's right. And so that's one of the issues and considerations maybe we need to focus on before we end this discussion is that, first of all, the first issue we have is developing the agendas themselves. How do the agenda items, how do we build the agendas? And secondly, how do we deal with specific requests to appear before the commission? Is the blue sheet process working? Is it effective? Do you want to change that? And at the call to the public, do we want to provide further guidelines to the department with respect to the call to the public in terms of time and number of those? Certainly, probably not the number, but the time given and how the commission acts with response in response to those comments from the public. Those would be the considerations.
I think it's very appropriate that before we actually vote on each specific agenda item, we're going to take action that you ask the people that have cared enough to show up at these meetings, whether they have comments. So that's the way you've been doing it, and I commend you for doing that. And I think that's appropriate. I think we should continue to do that. You know, we're a public entity, and if the public wants to talk to us, we should listen to them. And I think, having said that, I think this commission can control that in a manner that works with our schedules and the department schedules and everything. So I think we're doing it exactly right. And I think the blue sheet process works. It gives people an opportunity in an orderly way to comment on what's important to them. I think the calls to the public are very important. I think we should continue to do that. That gives them kind of a general opportunity at the conclusion of each day to tell us what they think is important. I don't think we should regulate that in any way. I think if someone's here and they want to talk to us, they should be allowed, and you can control that as president of the commission, or we can as a commission as a whole if it gets out of hand. But I think we're doing everything right, and I think we should continue on that process.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Crank. Do you have other?
Mr. President, I would repeat what Commissioner Crank said, and I think my only comment is at this point is if it's not broke, we should probably not fix it. And so I think the format that we're using now is working fine. Everybody can be heard. We're here to hear that. We're open and transparent, and I have nowhere to go, so I'm here for the long haul. So with that said, I like I said, if it's not broke, I'm not sure we should be trying to fix it.
I'd like to comment one thing. You'll notice that our agenda has been modified. I won't say quite a bit, but it's been improved. And part of this is Commissioner Culver's suggestion that we need to move like the director up front. So he does the first, so he gives his presentation. If we need to consider something, then we can consider it right at the last, like it was. And, the new commissioners didn't see this there, but the director position was he gave his report at the last. But if we have that at first, then we can address the problems that he may have, and he can bring them up and give them to us. At the last, we're hurrying the things, and, Commissioner Culver said this. The other thing is we're moving the minutes up so that we'll do this. In other words, the intent is to get the important things done there, and then we move into the audience and engage your time. If people have a chance to, we have a chance to offer people. I agree with Commissioner Craig. These people come here to listen and possibly comment. We have two places that are real set to comment. One is the blue slip, and this gets them in. And this is, recorded. And I think that's good to continue. The other thing is we have periodic calls for comments. Usually at each break, at the lunch break and evening, call to the public. And they can speak on anything they want. It may be, I've seen that certain times in the past when you have a whole group of come in, for instance, if you have, used to be when we had I'll just call them wolf wars, when we were talking about listing of the wolf or delisting and all this stuff, you'd have a whole room full of people that wanted to talk. And you had to take in at that time, and I wasn't doing this, but the presiding officer says, we got 20 people here, we've got 20 minutes, 1 minute apiece. And I think that's fair. But if we have a little time at each presentation, then my thinking of the protocol is basically the commissioners get to talk, we discuss it. We can ask the audience, and then you ask for a motion. And once that motion's all made and seconded, then the discussion is among the commissioners. That's my understanding of the protocol that I think we are following, and we should be. Does that sound reasonable?
Mr. President, members of the commission, that sounds reasonable. Yeah, I think that in terms of something being broke or not broke, I think that's right. I think the communications, again, once we have this dialogue with those that have expressed concerns or issues with the process, once we go over that process with them, they're very comfortable with it. So I think it's more of a communications issue, perhaps out of the director's office, that we can certainly do a little bit better job of. In fact, we could probably do it better department-wide. So we will do that.
In other words, we're kind of improving things is the way I see it.
We are.
And I think this moving the director up, getting her minutes done, getting that stuff, all her things done like that. And I'm agreeing I'm not perfect at it. But getting that done is a big improvement. And it's working. Thank you. Scott, do you want to comment?
Mr. President, members of the commission, I might just add, and going back to your comment about those topics that end up with a lot of discussion, like wolves and grizzly bears and those things that we have worked on in the past. We have always tried to allocate and anticipate that there will be a lot of public comment on those issues and set aside more time on the agenda for a number of people to comment, so that those folks have the opportunity to share their opinion with the commission. And I think that as long as we continue to do that and also maintain the public comment period at certain periods in the day, whether that be right before lunch or just before we adjourn for the day, that will give people the opportunity to present their views to the commission. And I think we can continue to do that.
Commissioner Brown?
Yes, Commissioner Anselmi.
I'm reading through this document, then we can place, a majority vote if somebody makes a comment and we decide to take it up, then how does it read? By a unanimous or a majority vote, we can take up that business even though it's not on the agenda?
That's correct. According to this policy.
I think that's.
Mr. President?
Yes, Commissioner Crank.
I'll be a lawyer for a little bit. The Wyoming Open Meetings Act is not an agenda-driven act. Some states have different kinds of statutory schemes that a public entity can only take up what is on their published agenda before the meeting. Wyoming is not like that. I think we in the department on our behalf makes every effort to make sure that there's an agenda out there so that the public is generally aware of what we're going to talk about, season settings, for instance. But if a commissioner wants to take, if this commission wants to take an act on something that is not on the agenda that takes our formal action, and it's important enough, we could just do it at that meeting. So we're not actually bound. I guess what I'm saying in a nutshell is we're not actually bound by what is in our published agenda. We could take other formal action in a public setting with a public vote and public deliberation, even though it's not on our agenda. But generally, I think it's a great idea that everything we plan on discussing is on our agenda up front and the public's notified of it, so they know if they want to show up and talk to us or not. But I think that kind of is what you're seeing, Commissioner Anselmo.
I agree with that there. Agree with that. I think, but if we publish it and be as open as we possibly can, that's the best policy we can follow, I think.
Absolutely. I agree, Mr. President.
Mr. President, members of the commission, we work aggressively to do just that with these agendas. So, okay, so on the protocol, well, other input, questions? Mr. President?
Excuse me, go ahead.
Any other comments you'd like us to consider as we look at this protocol?
I don't see any right now. Just go ahead.
Process for developing the agendas. As you know, we have agenda items that have to be dealt with every meeting. That happens almost every commission meeting. So we'll continue to do those as scheduled. Examples are damage claims and budgets and all those types of different items that we have come before you, season setting, et cetera. With regard to handling requests to appear before the commission, we'll continue to have that discussion with those individuals and those organizations as to how best to do that through the request blue sheet process or call to the public. However, how does the commission want to deal with a request, an aggressive request that they actually have their own separate agenda item and request to appear before the commission?
I'm going to make a comment on this. I think in some ways, if this could be the use of the commissioner in that area where that request is coming from, and at least he should be contacted so that he could evaluate maybe the situation. Possibly, maybe the president ought to be notified on that, just to make sure they're in the loop and they aren't all of a sudden caught. What? What's that all about? That's kind of my suggestion on that.
Mr. President, members of the commission, and that is the process now, that the president of the commission and the director will consult on those requests and make a decision as to whether or not to put that on the agenda. And in most cases, this is going to be on I think we need to view this as, in most cases, the issue will be a request for an item that's not on the agenda, because most will agree that once they understand the blue sheet process, that they can appear before you on a specific agenda before you provide direction or make a decision. They're very supportive of that process. This will be, and so that works on an item that's on the agenda. This would be a totally different agenda item, or that's where there's a little bit of gray area for an item that's not on the agenda. And often those come in very, very late, and we've already got an agenda developed at that point as well.
On this point right here, we add those things that kind of cuts down on our transparency, but we have the option at the end of each session that they can speak and they can address that. I know there's some pressure. They want to have be on the agenda, but maybe we ought to resist that to some extent. I'd open that up for commission.
Mr. President.
Yes.
You're referring to agenda item number 8, I think. And we had 2 agenda items following that referred back to agenda item number 8. Right. So the issue is that agenda item 9 and 10 didn't want to fill out a blue slip, apparently, I'm thinking, and felt that to be heard, they needed to be on the agenda. I guess I would throw it open to how do we deal with that? Say, look it. Either put them on the agenda like this or fill out a blue slip. I don't know. But I think this is exactly what you're referring to.
It is. That's exactly.
And we got the information yesterday from both agenda item 9 and 10 that we would have got with a blue slip. Right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Mr. President, members of the commission, and you're exactly right, Commissioner Clouda, and that is why this agenda item is on here. That's why we're having this discussion. And, you know, there was some discussion yesterday with respect to that process, that perhaps the blue sheet process would have been a better way to address it. That was even a discussion with at least one of the presenters yesterday. So again, it's a communications issue, I think, that once they understand that this is not an impediment to get before you, rather we're trying to facilitate and make it most efficient for the commission and for the presenter, they support it.
I think it should be that way, because that makes for a smoother meeting. This one right here, and the one we dug into right here just now, is the problem. That was perfectly covered already, and if they can understand it and explain it, and explain to them and understand it, they have that opportunity. And one of the things I kind of worrying about is if we get more and more of these people wanting to be directly on a part item of the agenda, when they're going to comment on an agenda item that's already there, we're filling our time up and the agenda up with things that are already going to be covered on that.
Mr. President,
Commissioner Crank.
just a couple hopefully quick comments. I think the way it currently works is if there is a question with regard to whether someone should be on the agenda or should just show up and give public comment, that the initial decision on that is made by the president of the commission and the director. I think that's appropriate. I trust that you will, do a good job doing that. And I think that's very appropriate. That's a great way to do it. I would just add if there, as a public entity, if there's ever a doubt, we should err on the side of giving everyone an opportunity to comment, and whether they do that as an agenda item or a blue sheet or just at the end of the day. Personally, I think it's okay. I'm not troubled by what happened during this commission meeting. I think, what Scott said, the department had intelligently built enough time into our season setting time on our agenda to allow all that comment, and then they came and they got heard and answered our questions, and we set seasons and exercised our discretion. So I guess I'd echo Commissioner Clouda. It doesn't seem to be broke. I don't think we need to fix it. And I hope that gives you enough guidance from the commission about what we want to see happen. But I think if there are requests to be on the agenda and it should go to the director and the president, and Mr. President has suggested that maybe you ought to consult the commissioner from that area and get his or her thoughts, and then you guys decide what goes on the agenda, and if not, we'll take care of them in public comment or via the blue sheet process.
Mr. President, exactly what Commissioner Crank said on agenda item number 7 was an issue. And I spent an inordinate amount of time, and it was good time spent on the phone with 2 of those individuals, and it took a while to explain blue slip procedure, and I think it worked out fine. They could have been on the agenda and would have said nothing more and nothing less. So based on that, I think that in that case, the blue slip, by explaining it to them, both of them, it worked fine.
Mr. President, members of the commission, so Commissioner Clouda, the department agrees with that in our discussions.
Yeah.
I think what was of concern, and we can put an end to this discussion, what was of concern is that our discussions with certain individuals with respect to the blue sheet process or the call to the public or how we were proposing to run the commission meeting per the president's direction was perhaps viewed as being a barrier to getting someone before the commission. And that just is simply not the case. So we're trying to facilitate that at every commission meeting. So I think that was the underlying maybe just concern from certain department employees and some commissioners. That just was not our intent. So we will communicate a little bit better and get some more information out there to folks with respect to requesting to appear or getting an agenda item or coming before the commission, and continue the process as we have in place right now with improvements along the way. The protocol can always be improved, and Mr. President, you're right. We've improved it just in the last couple of commission meetings, so we appreciate that. So we'll continue to do that.
Mr. President,
Yes.
Is
Commissioner
that
Craig.
protocol or how to get on the commission or do a blue sheet or make a public comment? Is that on our website anyplace?
Mr. President, Commissioners Crank, it was, and I took that off until we had this discussion here so that we could make modifications if necessary to that. But that process on the website said exactly what we're discussing right now. Decision was between that evaluation would take place with the president and the department director will consider requests and advise requesters of approval or disapproval.
I'd suggest the department ought to put it back up.
Okay.
The, back on the, you were talking about the request to appear form.
Yeah.
Director Talbot, am I
If we,
missing anything?
if
No, I
we
don't
get,
think
we get that, then we evaluate it, right? Before it is added to the agenda.
The president and the director will discuss it and determine whether it's appropriate for public comment period or a blue slip, or whether it should be a separate agenda item. I think we can look at those and evaluate them on a case-by-case basis. And if we have questions, we can contact the local commissioner and discuss it and go forward with that, with the idea that we will always err on the side of the public and bring it to the commission if there's any question.
Absolutely.
Okay, that, I think the thing is, if we have the discretion, I mean, it's like this situation we're in yesterday. We have these things itemized, lined out to do. Just like Scott said earlier, we have these things lined out to do, and the blue slip answers the thing. If the thing about this, when you put that on, make sure they understand that it will be evaluated on that. Do you understand what I'm saying? And do you agree with that, Commissioner Crank?
Yes.
On that, because particularly when you put things out on the computer and stuff like that, it's so easy to fill some of them out. And then if they think filling it out, and this, I think, was to some extent what happened, I filled that out and I get to be on. And that's not necessarily correct. And we need to explain that clearly.
Mr. President, members of the commission, totally agree. There's some improvements to this form that we can already make based on this discussion. So with your permission, we'll make those modifications to this request to appear. It's a one-page request to appear. We'll send that out to you, all of you, for some input before we put it on the website and go from there.
Good. That sounds good. Okay. Have you got everything?
Mr. President, members of the commission, thank you. Yes, that provides some good direction for us, and we'll make those changes and improvements and continue to move forward.
Okay.
And Mr. Cassidy, have I missed anything? Any public?
Oh, and you can tell I saw no reason.
All right. Okay. With your permission, I do need to give you an update off of this agenda item just for general planning purposes.
Okay. Go ahead. I'd like to have a call to the public, after we finish right here. Go ahead. Are you gonna
update this
us?
agenda item, and then I'll give you an update on just a scheduling issue for the next agenda?
Well, no, go ahead, and then we'll do the call to the public after you're done.
Okay, call the public. Scott, so we want to plan on the agenda item 23 to start at about 12:45.
Commissioner, President Price, and Commissioner Director Talbot. As you know, we have 3 appeals. One of them, Longwell's, has been postponed to the July commission meeting. It's my understanding that the grants, where the first appeal will be here about 12:30. It was scheduled for 1, but it's going to be about 12:30. If we wanted to start about 12:45, we could get that going. Mark McCarty, the second appeal, we contacted him. He plans on being here about 1 o'clock, so he should be here in time by the time we finish up for grants, that we can get right into Mark's and then maybe start a little earlier. And so grants don't have to wait, and we can finish this up and call the day if that would be appropriate.
Okay, so after lunch break, 12:30 back here. So we can hear.
12:45 would probably be.
Or 12:45.
12:45 would
Okay.
probably work out great.
12:45. Okay. Is that okay with the commissioners? Okay. Okay, thank you. Call to the public. Is there anybody in the public that has some comments that they want to come up to the podium and address? Okay, seeing none, close this session of the meeting. Thank you.